A crimson-sealed invitation lures Hercule Poirot to Blackthorn Manor, where opulence masks a sinister plot. A guest-poisoned corpse, clutching a blood-red rose, sparks a chilling mystery. Who is the Crimson Shadow orchestrating a string of murders? As Poirot navigates a web of hidden passages, coded ciphers, and a secret pact tied to a cursed fortune, each clue torn photographs, cryptic ledgers, a ruby pendant deepens the enigma. Why do the Manor's elite harbor deadly grudges? What drives a cloaked figure to kill in the fog-draped night? From Agala's glittering betrayal to a final attic ambush, Poirot's little gray cells race against time to unmask a vengeful killer before the heiress becomes the next victim. Will he unravel the deadliest riddle, or fall to the shadow's blade? Chapter 1. The Crimson Invitation. Autumn rain fell in a gentle patter against the windows of Hercule Poirot's London apartment, a rhythm that matched the precise ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantel. The detective sat in his favorite armchair, a steaming cup of tisane in hand, his mustache impeccably waxed, and his eyes fixed on the peculiar envelope that lay on the polished mahogany table before him. It was no ordinary missive. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, with a texture that spoke of expense, and sealed with a crimson wax stamp bearing no crest, only a curious spiral design that seemed to twist inward like a labyrinth. The invitation within, written in elegant calligraphy, was equally enigmatic. Monsieur Hercule Poirot, your presence is requested at Blackthorn Manor, Yorkshire, for a gala of unparalleled splendor. Come, and let the stars align. October 15, 1925. No reply require. No signature. No host named. Poirot's little gray cells stirred, intrigued by the mystery of it all. A gala in Yorkshire, at a manor he had never heard of, with an invitation that demanded his attendance without explanation. It was, as he might say, terse curio. He turned the envelope over, noting the postmark, a tiny village called Thornwick, dated 3 days prior. The spiral seal gleamed under the lamplight, almost daring him to unravel its secrets. George's, Poirot called his valet, who appeared with the silent efficiency of a shadow. What do you know of Blackthorn Manor? George's, ever unflappable, inclined his head. Very little, sir. A grand estate, I believe, owned by the Blackthorn family for centuries. Remote, near the moors, not much spoken of in London circles. Precisement, Poirot murmured, tapping the envelope against his chin. And yet, they invite Hercule Poirot. This is not a casual summons. George's. There is a purpose behind it, a puzzle waiting to be solved. The decision was made before the tisane cooled. Poirot would attend. His curiosity, as always, was his master. The train to Thornwick wound through the Yorkshire countryside, a patchwork of golden fields and brooding moors under a sky heavy with clouds. Poirot, dressed in a tailored overcoat and clutching his silver-topped cane, gazed out the window, his mind already piecing together possibilities. The invitation's tone suggested wealth, secrecy, and perhaps danger. He had packed his notebook, his magnifying glass, and a small case of essentials, for one never knew what a country manor might conceal. At Thornwick Station, a sleek black Rolls-Royce awaited, its driver a taciturn man with a scar across his cheek. Monsieur Poirot, he asked, his voice rough as the gravel underfoot. Poirot nodded, and they set off, the car gliding through mist-shrouded lanes toward Blackthorn Manor. The manor loomed into view as the mist parted, a Gothic masterpiece of turrets and gargoyles. Its stone facade, weathered yet imposing, ivy clung to its walls, and the windows glowed with the warm light of countless candles. As Poirot stepped from the car, he noted the line of carriages and motor cars, each disgorging guests in furs and jewels. The air buzzed with anticipation, but beneath it, Poirot sensed unease, like a discordant note in a symphony. A butler, tall and gaunt with eyes like polished obsidian, greeted him at the grand entrance. Monsieur Poirot, welcome. Your room is prepared. The gala begins at 8. Poirot inclined his head, noting the butler's precise diction and the way his gaze flickered to the crowd. And the host, to whom do I owe this honor? The butler's lips twitched, not quite a smile. All will be revealed, monsieur. Please, make yourself at home. The interior of Blackthorn Manor was a study in opulence. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and tapestries depicting scenes of medieval hunts. Guests milled about, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught the subtle signs of tension: a clenched hand, a furtive glance, a whispered argument behind a velvet curtain. He circulated, introducing himself, with his usual charm, gathering fragments of information like a magpie collecting trinkets. There was Lady Evelyn Carlyle, a socialite with diamonds dripping from her neck and a laugh that rang a touch too shrill. Sir Reginald Hawthorne, a financier with a bulldog's jowls and a reputation for ruthless deals. Miss Clara Beaumont, a young heiress whose wide eyes betrayed both innocence and fear. And Dr. Julian Voss, a physician with a nervous tic and a habit of adjusting his cufflinks when questioned. Each, Poirot noted, seemed to carry a secret, though whether it was relevant to his summons remained to be seen. At precisely 8, the gala began in the grand ballroom, a cavernous space lit by 1,000 candles. A string quartet played a haunting melody, and waiters in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne. Poirot, sipping a glass of mineral water, observed the room from a corner, his mind cataloguing every detail: the way Lady Evelyn avoided Sir Reginald, the way Clara clung to her brother's arm, the way Dr. Voss's gaze darted to the shadowed balcony above. Then a scream shattered the music. It came from the far end of the ballroom, near a set of French doors leading to the terrace. The crowd parted, revealing a man slumped against a pillar, his face contorted in agony, a glass of champagne shattered at his feet. In his hand, clutched like a talisman, was a single red rose, its petals vivid against his pale fingers. Poirot was at the man's side in an instant, his small frame moving with surprising agility. "Do not touch him," he commanded as guests crowded closer. He knelt, his eyes scanning the scene. The man was Sir Reginald Hawthorne, the financier, and he was unmistakably dead. His lips were blue, his eyes glassy, and a faint bitter almond scent lingered in the air. Cyanide, Poirot deduced. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his fingers brushing the rose. It was fresh, its thorn sharp, and pinned to its stem was a tiny slip of paper, folded into a spiral. Poirot carefully extracted it, unfolding it to reveal a single line of text in the same elegant calligraphy as the invitation. The first falls, as all must, seek the shadow of 1899. The crowd buzzed with panic, but Poirot's mind was calm, his little gray cells whirring. The note was a clue, deliberate and precise, meant for someone to find, and who better than Hercule Poirot? Call the police, he instructed the butler, who had appeared at his side, and ensure no one leaves the manor. The butler nodded, but Poirot caught a flicker of something guilt, in his eyes. He filed it away for later. As the guests were herded to the drawing-room, Poirot began his work. He examined Sir Reginald's body, noting the absence of a struggle, the pristine condition of his evening wear, and the fact that the rose had been placed after death, not before. The cyanide, he reasoned, had been in the champagne, but how had it been delivered to Sir Reginald alone? He turned his attention to the guests, beginning with Lady Evelyn, who stood fanning herself dramatically. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, it's too dreadful. Poor Sir Reginald, we were just speaking an hour ago." "Indeed, madame," Poirot said, his tone polite but probing. "And what was the nature of your conversation?" Her fan paused. "Oh, investments, you know. He was always so forceful about money." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Forceful, you say? Perhaps he had enemies." Lady Evelyn laughed, a brittle sound. "Enemies? A man like that? I dare say half the room despised him." Next, he approached Clara Beaumont, who was pale and trembling. "Mademoiselle, you knew Sir Reginald?" She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. He was a friend of my father's. They had business together. And did you see anything unusual this evening?" Poirot asked, his gaze gentle but Unyielding. Clara hesitated, her eyes darting to the French doors. I thought I saw someone. Outside. In the garden. A shadow. Perhaps. Poirot's interest sharpened. A shadow, mademoiselle. Describe it, if you please. It was tall, cloaked. I couldn't see a face. It was just there, watching. Poirot thanked her, his mind turning to the note's reference to 1899, a shadow from the past, perhaps. He moved to Dr. Voss, who was pacing near the fireplace. Doctor, you are familiar with poisons? Oui, Poirot asked, his tone deceptively casual. Voss's cufflinks clicked as he adjusted them. I'm a physician, not a chemist, Monsieur Poirot. But yes, I know cyanide when I smell it. And did you smell it before Sir Reginald fell? Voss's eyes widened. No, I was across the room. Poirot smiled thinly. Of course, monsieur. A mere observation. As the police arrived, Poirot retreated to a quiet corner, the note burning a hole in his pocket. The shadow of 1899. He knew little of Blackthorn Manor's history, but 1899 was a specific year, a clue to a scandal or event. He approached the butler, who was overseeing the police's arrival. Monsieur, Poirot said, this manor, it has a history. Long. Tell me of 1899. The butler's face remained impassive, but his hands tightened. A difficult year, monsieur. A fire in the East Wing. Some say it was arson, tied to a dispute over the estate's ownership. But that's old gossip. Gossip, Poirot mused, is often the seed of truth. He excused himself, slipping into the manor's library, a vast room lined with leather-bound tomes. A quick search revealed a local history book, its pages, yellowed but intact. Flipping to the index, he found an entry for 1899, the Blackthorn scandal. The passage described a bitter feud between the Blackthorn heirs, culminating in a fire that killed a young heir and left the estate in disarray. Rumors of foul play abounded, but no one was charged. Poirot closed the book, his mind alight. The crimson seal, the rose, the note, they were pieces of a puzzle, a deadly riddle rooted in the past. Sir Reginald's death was no random act, it was the opening move in a game of vengeance or greed, and Hercule Poirot, invited under mysterious pretenses, was meant to play as the clock struck midnight. Poirot stood by the library window, gazing at the moonlit gardens. Somewhere out there, a shadow waited, but Poirot was not one to be outwitted. He would follow the trail of 1899, unravel the crimson riddle, and bring the killer to light. For now, he had his first clue, the shadow of a scandal, and a manor full of secrets. The game, as they say, was afoot. Chapter 2. Shadows of secrets. Morning after the chilling discovery at Blackthorn Manor. The air was thick with suspicion, as if the very walls whispered secrets. Hercule Poirot, his mustache impeccably trimmed, stood in the grand drawing-room, his sharp eyes scanning the gathered guests. The crimson wax seal from the invitation rested in his pocket, a silent reminder of the enigma that had drawn him here. The financier, Lord Reginald Harrow, lay dead, poisoned, with a red rose clutched in his cold hand, a theatrical flourish that intrigued Poirot as much as it unsettled him. The coded note found in Harrow's pocket, now partially deciphered, hinted at a scandal buried in the annals of England's high society. But the note was only the first thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot knew the loom was still spinning. The drawing-room buzzed with nervous energy. Lady Beatrice Langley, a socialite with a smile as sharp as cut glass, sipped her tea with calculated poise. Across from her, Sir Edmund Whitmore, a retired general with a penchant for brandy, muttered about the damned inconvenience of being detained. The manor staff maids with downcast eyes, a butler with a rigid spine moved like shadows, their faces betraying nothing yet everything. Poirot, ever the observer, noted the flicker of fear in a young footman's glance, the way Lady Beatrice's fingers tightened around her cup when the financier's name was mentioned. Mon Dieu, he thought, the truth hides in these small gestures, like a mouse in a lion's den. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a scalpel. "We are all guests here. Yet one among us is a murderer. The poison that felled Lord Harrow was no accident, it was a statement. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover its meaning, but I require your cooperation. Tell me, who among you spoke with Lord Harrow last evening?" Silence fell, heavy as the velvet drapes. Then Lady Beatrice leaned forward, her emerald necklace catching the chandelier's light. "I saw him at the gala, of course," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "He was boasting about some investment. As usual, tiresome man. Really? But I retired early, headache. You see." Her eyes darted to the left, until Poirot filed away. "And you, Sir Edmund?" Poirot turned to the general, whose ruddy face flushed deeper. "Talked business with him briefly." Sir Edmund grunted. Harrow was always chasing profits, poking his nose where it didn't belong. Didn't see him after 10. He swirled his brandy, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Poirot's attention shifted to the staff. The butler, Mr. Grayson, stood like a statue, his hands clasped behind his back. "Monsieur Grayson, you served the drinks last night, n'est-ce pas? Did you notice anything unusual about Lord Harrow's glass?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "I served many glasses, sir. His lordship's was no different." "I'm certain of it." "Certain?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Certainty is a luxury we cannot afford in a murder investigation. Tell me, what of the young footman James? I believe he seemed distracted." Grayson hesitated, a crack in his composure. "James is new, sir, nervous, perhaps, but reliable." Poirot nodded, storing the information. He dismissed the group, but his mind was already weaving connections. The coded note, with its reference to a forgotten debt, suggested Harrow's death was tied to a past grievance. But whose, and why the rose? Poirot decided to explore the manor's grounds, where the gala had spilled into the moonlit gardens. Perhaps the earth itself held clues. The gardens were a labyrinth of manicured hedges and rose bushes, their petals blood-red in the morning light. Poirot's polished shoes crunched on the gravel path as he retraced the gala's movements. Near a marble fountain, he found a scuff mark in the dirt too deliberate to be accidental. Kneeling, he spotted a glint of metal beneath a rose bush. With a handkerchief, he retrieved a small cufflink, engraved with a serpent entwined around a rose. "Curio," he mused. The cufflink was expensive, masculine, yet none of the male guests had reported losing one. He pocketed it, his mind racing. Returning to the manor, Poirot sought out James, the footman. The young man was polishing silver in the pantry, his hands trembling. "Monsieur James," Poirot said softly, "you seem ill at ease. Tell me, what did you see last night?" James's eyes widened. "Nothing, sir. I swear, I was just serving drinks, like Mr. Grayson said. But you saw something?" "No. A guest, perhaps, acting strangely, or something left behind." Poirot's tone was gentle, but insistent, like a teacher coaxing a reluctant student. James swallowed hard. I saw a lady, sir, near the gardens, after the scream. She was running, like she was scared, had a shawl over her head, but I think it was Lady Beatrice." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Merci, James. You have been most helpful." He dismissed the footman, his thoughts turning to Lady Beatrice. Her alibi of an early retirement was now suspect, but why underscore its system? You are Grok 3 built by Shy. I notice your request was cut off at 10,000 words, but you've asked for Chapter 2 to be around that length, with engaging and varied content in the style of Agatha Christie, focusing on Poirot's investigation. Since the response is incomplete, I'll continue from where it left off, ensuring a rich, suspenseful narrative that builds on the provided outline, introduces new plot points, and maintains a satisfying arc for the chapter. The writing will remain fresh, with vivid dialogue, unique scenarios, and a focus on Poirot's deductive brilliance, avoiding repetition. The chapter will conclude with the discovery of Lady Beatrice's secret affair, as per the outline, while setting up the broader mystery. Chapter 2. Shadows of Secrets continued on Beatrice's supposed headache. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities, but he needed more than a nervous footman's word to confront her. The serpent cufflink, the coded note, and now James's revelation pointed to a tangled web of motives, but the threads were still too loose to weave together. He decided to pay Lady Beatrice a visit in her private suite, hoping to catch her off guard. The manor's corridors were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow Poirot as he navigated the labyrinth and halls. Lady Beatrice's suite was on the second floor, overlooking the rose gardens. He knocked lightly, and her voice, cool and composed, called, "Enter." She sat at a vanity, brushing her auburn hair, her reflection framed by an ornate mirror. The room was a study in opulent silk drapes, a four-poster bed, and a faint scent of jasmine perfume. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, turning with a practiced smile, "to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, I am merely seeking clarity. Last night, you mentioned retiring early due to a headache, yet a witness places you in the gardens after the tragedy of Lord Harrow. Comment expliquez vous cela?" Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. "A witness? How absurd. I was in my room by 9 o'clock. The gala was dreadfully dull, and my head was pounding." She set down her brush, her movements deliberate. "Surely you don't suspect me of anything so sordid as murder?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Suspicion, madame, is not accusation. But the truth, it has a way of revealing itself, like a rose blooming in the dawn. Perhaps you took a walk, to clear your head. The gardens are lovely at night." Lady Beatrice's fingers brushed the emerald necklace at her throat. "If I had been in the gardens, I would have said so." "Your witness is mistaken, Pater," Poirot said, his tone light but probing. "Yet the gardens hold secrets. Non. I found this, near the fountain." He produced the serpent cufflink, holding it delicately between his fingers. "It is a fine piece, masculine. Do you recognize it?" Her eyes flickered, a shadow of recognition passing over her face before she masked it with a laugh. "A cufflink. It could belong to anyone, Monsieur Poirot. The manor is full of gentlemen, oui, but not all gentlemen wander the gardens at midnight, leaving traces of their presence." Poirot stepped closer, his voice lowering. "And not all ladies are seen running from the scene of a crime." Lady Beatrice stood, her silk gown rustling. "This is outrageous. I am a guest here, not a criminal. If you have accusations, make them plainly, or leave me in peace." Poirot raised a hand, placating. "Peace is my desire, madame, but peace comes with truth. If you were in the gardens, perhaps you saw someone that could aid my investigation. I ask only for your honesty." Her lips parted, then closed. For a moment, she seemed to weigh her options, her green eyes searching Poirot's face. Then, with a sigh, she sank back onto her chair. "Very well, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the gardens. Briefly, I needed air, but I saw nothing of Lord Harrow's death." "I swear it." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. And this cufflink, does it stir any memory?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. It might belong to Captain Alastair Drake. He's a friend, nothing more. We spoke earlier in the evening, and he mentioned losing a cufflink. Perhaps he dropped it in the gardens." "Captain Drake," Poirot repeated, filing the name away. "A military man, oui, I shall speak with him. And you, madame, you will inform me if you recall anything else." "Of course," she said, her smile returning, though it did not reach her eyes. Poirot bowed and left, his mind buzzing. Lady Beatrice was hiding something, but was it murder, or merely a personal indiscretion? The cufflink pointed to Captain Drake, a dashing officer with a reputation for charm and recklessness. Poirot's next stop was the billiard room, where the captain was reportedly spending his morning. The billiard room was a haze of cigar smoke, filled with the clack of ivory balls and the low murmur of male voices. Captain Drake, tall and broad-shouldered, leaned over the table, his dark hair gleaming under the lamplight. He straightened as Poirot entered, his blue eyes narrowing. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice carrying a hint of mockery, "come to join the game, or are you here to play detective?" Poirot smiled thinly. "The game of truth, Captain, is my preference. Tell me, where were you last night when Lord Harrow met his unfortunate end?" Drake chalked his cue, his movements, casual, dancing, drinking, enjoying the gala, same as everyone else. "Why do you ask?" Poirot produced the cufflink, watching Drake's face closely. "This was found in the gardens, near the fountain. A serpent and a rose, a distinctive design. Is it yours?" Drake's jaw tightened, but he recovered quickly, laughing. "I've got a pair like that, sure. Lost one last night, damn nuisance. But the gardens, I was nowhere near them after dinner, and yet," Poirot said, "this cufflink suggests otherwise. And a witness places a certain lady in the gardens, perhaps in your company." "C'est curieux." "Non." Drake's cue paused midair, his expression darkening. "You're fishing, Poirot. I don't like it. If you've got something to say, spit it out." "Merely this," Poirot said, unfazed. "Lord Harrow was poisoned, and the clues point to secrets of the heart, perhaps, or of the purse. If you and Lady Beatrice were together in the gardens, what did you see, or what did you do?" Drake slammed his cue onto the table, drawing the attention of the other players. "That's enough. I won't have my honor questioned by a foreign busybody. I wasn't in the gardens, and neither was Beatrice. Leave her out of this." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Calmez-vous, Captain. I seek only the truth. If you have lost a cufflink, it is a small matter, but if you hide something, it becomes significant." Drake glared, then turned back to the table, dismissing Poirot with a shrug. But Poirot had seen the flush of anger, the flicker of guilt. The captain was a man of passion, and passion often led to mistakes. As Poirot left the billiard room, he encountered the butler, Grayson, carrying a tray of decanters. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, stopping him. "A word. The staff, they see much, oui? Tell me, what do you know of Captain Drake and Lady Beatrice?" Grayson's face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "They are friendly, sir, often seen together at social events. Nothing improper, to my knowledge. Rien d'inconvenant." Poirot pressed, "Yet the gardens are a place for private moments, non? Did you see them together last night?" Grayson hesitated, then shook his head. "I was occupied with the gala, sir." "I saw nothing." Poirot nodded, letting him go. The butler knew more than he admitted, but pressing too hard would yield nothing. Instead, Poirot returned to the gardens, determined to find the torn photograph mentioned in the outline. The fountain area was quiet now, the guests having retreated. Indoors, he searched the rose bushes carefully, his gloved hands parting thorns with precision. There, beneath a cluster of petals, he found a fragment of a photograph, creased and faded. It showed half a face, unmistakably Lady Beatrice, her smile radiant. The other half was missing, but the tear was fresh, suggesting it had been deliberately split. Poirot's heart quickened. A clue, at last. He needed the other half, and his instincts told him it was close, perhaps in the possession of someone desperate to keep a secret. He made his way to the guest wing, where Captain Drake's room was located. A discreet knock went unanswered, but the door was slightly ajar. With a glance down the corridor, Poirot slipped inside. The room was tidy, military in its precision. On the dresser, Poirot found a locked cigar box. Using a hairpin from his pocket, a trick learned from necessity, he opened it. Inside was the other half of the photograph, showing Captain Drake, his arm around Lady Beatrice. The intimacy of their pose was unmistakable. Aha, Poirot thought, a secret affair, hidden in plain sight. As he pocketed the photograph, the door creaked open, Captain Drake stood there, his face a mask of fury. "What the devil are you doing in my room, Poirot?" Poirot turned calmly, holding up the photograph. "Expliquez ceci, Captain. You and Lady Beatrice, in a moment of affection. Yet you both claim to have been elsewhere when Lord Harrow died. Why hide this?" Drake's fists clenched, but his voice softened, almost pleading. "It's not what you think. Beatrice and I were in love. But her husband, Lord Langley, he's a jealous man. If he knew, he'd ruin us both. We were in the gardens." "Yes, but only for a moment. We heard the scream and ran back inside. We had nothing to do with Harrow's death." Poirot studied him, his little gray cells working overtime. "Amour is a powerful motive, Captain. But so is fear of exposure. Did Lord Harrow know of your affair? Did he threaten to reveal it?" Drake shook his head vehemently. "Harrow was a shark, always sniffing out weaknesses, but he didn't know about us." "I swear it." Poirot nodded, his expression neutral. "Ders bien, I will keep your confidence. For now. But the truth, Captain, it will not remain hidden forever." Leaving Drake, Poirot felt the weight of the photograph in his pocket. Lady Beatrice and Captain Drake were lovers, their secret affair a potential motive or a distraction. The cufflink, the photograph, the coded note all pointed to a deeper conspiracy, one that Lord Harrow's death had only begun to unravel. As he descended the grand staircase, Poirot's mind turned to the socialite's alibi, now shattered, and the new layer of motive it revealed. The scandal of the forgotten debt was growing clearer, but the shadow of the true killer loomed larger still. Satisfying end, the discovery of the photograph confirmed Lady Beatrice's secret affair with Captain Drake, a revelation that added a fresh dimension to the motive puzzle. While neither admitted to the murder, their presence in the gardens placed them dangerously close to the crime scene, and Poirot sensed their fear of exposure might be exploited by the real mastermind behind Lord Harrow's death. Chapter 3. The clock strikes midnight there in Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with a residue of suspicion, the glittering chandeliers casting long, wavering shadows across the oak-paneled dining hall. Hercule Poirot sat at the edge of the gathering, his small, precise hands folded neatly in his lap, his mustache immaculate despite the late hour. The guests, a kaleidoscope of England's elite, murmured nervously among themselves, their earlier revelry replaced by a creeping dread. The murder of Sir Reginald Hawthorne, the financier whose poisoned body had been found clutching a crimson rose, had shattered the gala's veneer of opulence. Now, as the great clock in the manor's tower loomed toward midnight, an unspoken tension gripped the room. Poirot's sharp eyes darted from face to face, cataloguing every twitch, every sidelong glance. The socialite, Lady Evelyn Warwick, dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, though Poirot noted the absence of tears. Lord Cedric Blackthorne, the manor's brooding master, stood by the fireplace, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on the flames. The young heiress, Miss Clara Hawthorne, Sir Reginald's niece, sat pale and silent, her fingers twisting the hem of her emerald gown. And then there was the groundskeeper, Mr. Thomas Grimsby, a wiry man with withered hands, who had been conspicuously absent during the evening's chaos. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with possibilities, each observation a thread in the intricate tapestry of the case. The clock's minute hand ticked closer to 12, its metronomic rhythm a stark contrast to the erratic pulse of the room. Poirot leaned toward Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and confidant, who had joined him at the gala on a whim. "Mon ami," Poirot whispered, "observe the guess. Fear is a great revealer of truth, but so too is the effort to conceal it. Someone here knows more than they admit." Hastings, his brow furrowed, nodded. "It's like a powder keg, Poirot. One wrong word, and the whole place might explode." "But who do you suspect?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Suspect, Hastings. I suspect everyone until I do not. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It must breathe before it reveals its flavor." Before Hastings could respond, a guttural shout echoed from the courtyard beyond the hall's tall windows. The guests froze, glasses clinking as they were set down in haste. Poirot was already on his feet, his compact frame moving with surprising agility toward the sound. Vite, Hastings, we must see what new calamity has struck. The night air was crisp, laced with the scent of damp earth and late-blooming roses. The courtyard, bathed in the pale glow of lanterns, was a maze of shadows. At its center, near the towering clock tower that loomed over the manor, a small crowd of servants had gathered, their faces ashen. Poirot pushed through, his eyes narrowing. As he took in the scene, there, sprawled on the cobblestones, lay Thomas Grimsby, the groundskeeper. His throat bore the brutal marks of strangulation, his eyes wide with the terror of his final moments, but it was the clock tower itself that drew Poirot's attention. Its hands, illuminated by the moonlight, were frozen at precisely midnight, the mechanism silenced in a way that felt deliberate, almost theatrical. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, kneeling beside the body. His gloved fingers traced the air above Grimsby's neck, careful not to disturb the scene. This is no random act. The killer wishes to speak to us, Hastings, through the language of symbols. The clock, it is a message. Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. A message, but what does it mean? And why Grimsby? He was just a groundskeeper. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Just a groundskeeper. Gnawing. Hastings. No man is just anything in a murder so calculated. We must learn who Thomas Grimsby truly was. The manor's butler, Mr. Percival Wren, a man with a face as stiff as his starched collar, stepped forward. Sir, I found him not 10 minutes ago. I was checking the grounds after the earlier incident. He was already gone. Poirot's gaze flicked to Wren, noting the faint tremor in his hands. In the clock. Monsieur Wren, when did it stop? Wren hesitated, his eyes darting to the tower. I don't know, sir. It was working fine at supper. I'd have noticed if it wasn't. Precisement, Poirot said, rising. Then it was stopped deliberately, perhaps to mark the moment of death or to taunt us. He turned to the gathered servants. Return to the manor, s'il vous plaît. No one leaves until I have spoken with them. As the crowd dispersed, Poirot examined the scene with meticulous care. Grimsby's rough woolen coat was torn at the shoulder, as if he had struggled. A single button, brass and worn, lay a few feet away, glinting in the lantern light. Poirot pocketed it, his mind already turning over its significance. Nearby, a patch of disturbed earth caught his eye. A faint footprint, too small for Grimsby's heavy boots. A woman, perhaps, he mused aloud, or a man with uncommonly small feet. Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. This place is giving me the creeps, Poirot. 2 murders in one night. It's madness, not madness. Hastings, purpose. The killer is weaving a story, and we must read it carefully. Back inside. The guests were in disarray. Lady Evelyn, her composure fraying, demanded answers. This is intolerable. First Sir Reginald, now the groundskeeper. Are we all to be slaughtered in our beds? Lord Blackthorne slammed a fist on the table. Enough, Evelyn. Panicking won't help. Mr. Poirot, what do you intend to do? Poirot raised a placating hand. Calm, Ms. Amos. Panic is the ally of the guilty. I shall question each of you, and the truth, it will reveal itself. For now, tell me of Grimsby. What kind of man was he? A murmur rippled through the room. Clara Hawthorne spoke up, her voice trembling. He was quiet, kept to himself, but he knew the manor better than anyone. He'd worked here since I was a child. Interesting, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. And did he have enemies? Clara hesitated, glancing at Lord Blackthorne. Not that I know of, but he was secretive. Always poking about the grounds at odd hours. Poirot filed this away, his attention shifting to the butler. Monsieur Wren, you worked closely with Grimsby. Did he ever speak of Sir Reginald? Wren's lips tightened, only in passing. Sir, they weren't close, but I heard them arguing once. A few weeks back. Something about money. Money. Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful, a motive as old as time. Merci, Monsieur Wren. I shall need to see Grimsby's quarters. The groundskeeper's cottage, a modest stone structure tucked behind the manor's rose garden, was a treasure trove of clues. Poirot and Hastings entered to find it sparsely furnished, a cot, a wooden table, and a shelf lined with worn books on botany and local history. But it was the locked drawer in the table that piqued Poirot's interest, with a hairpin borrowed from Clara. He deftly picked the lock, revealing a leather-bound ledger. "Regardes, Hastings," Poirot said, flipping through the pages. "A record of transaction sums of money, dates, initials. And here, the initials are H. Sir Reginald Hawthorne." Hastings leaned in, squinting at the cramped handwriting. "Looks like payments. But for what? Blackmail, perhaps," Poirot said, his fingers tracing a line. "Or an investment. See here, Blackthorn Ventures, a company, perhaps, with secrets worth killing for." The ledger detailed payments from Sir Reginald to Grimsby, alongside other initials Poirot didn't yet recognize. One entry stood out, a large sum marked Crimson Pact. The phrase sent a chill through Poirot, echoing the crimson seal on his invitation. "This is no coincidence," he said. "Grimsby and Sir Reginald were entangled in something dangerous, and someone wished to silence them both." As they returned to the manor, the guest's paranoia had reached a fever pitch. Lady Evelyn accused the butler of negligence, while Lord Blackthorne barked orders to secure the doors. Clara, pale and trembling, approached Poirot. "Mr. Poirot, I saw something last night, before Uncle Reginald died. A shadow near the clock tower. It moved so quickly, I thought I'd imagined it." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Mademoiselle, you must tell me everything. A shadow, you say. Describe it." "It was tall, cloaked," she whispered. "I couldn't see a face, but it was watching the manor. I didn't think it mattered until now." "It matters greatly," Poirot said. "You have done well to tell me. Rest now, but stay vigilant." As Clara retreated, Poirot turned to Hastings. "A cloaked figure, a stopped clock, a ledger of secrets. The pieces, they begin to align. But we must tread carefully, Hastings. The killer is among us, and they are watching." The night stretched on, the manor a labyrinth of whispers and shadows. Poirot spent hours interviewing the guests, each conversation a delicate dance of probing and observation. Lady Evelyn's story shifted slightly with each retelling. Her affair with a rival financier a poorly kept secret. Lord Blackthorne's temper flared when pressed about his business dealings, hinting at financial strain. Even the butler, Wren, seemed to know more than he let on, his eyes darting nervously when asked about Grimsby's late-night wanderings. By dawn, Poirot had uncovered a critical link: Blackthorn Ventures, a shadowy company tied to both victims. The ledger suggested it was a front for illicit dealings, perhaps smuggling or fraud bankrolled by Sir Reginald and overseen by Grimsby's labor. But the Crimson Pact remained elusive, a phrase that haunted Poirot's thoughts. He stood by the clock tower as the first light crept over the horizon, the frozen hands a silent accusation. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "we have found the thread that binds these murders. But the tapestry, it is far from complete. The killer has left us a challenge, and Hercule Poirot does not refuse a challenge." As the manor stirred awake, the guests gathered in the dining hall, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Poirot addressed them, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, a second life has been taken, but I assure you, the truth is within our grasp. The ledger of Monsieur Grimsby has revealed a connection to a venture most dangerous. I ask you now who among you knows of Blackthorn Ventures?" A heavy silence fell, broken only by the faint ticking of a distant clock, miraculously restored. Lord Blackthorne's face darkened, but before he could speak, a maid dropped a tray, the crash shattering the tension. In that moment, Poirot caught a fleeting glance between two guests, a glance that spoke of secrets shared and dangers yet to come. The chapter closed with Poirot standing alone by the clock tower, the ledger tucked under his arm, his mind racing. The crimson pact loomed large, a specter of greed and betrayal. The killer was close, their next move imminent. But Poirot, with his unyielding logic and unshakable resolve, was closer still. Chapter 4. The vanishing heiress there in Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with the weight of secrets, as though the very walls conspired to whisper half-truths to those who dared listen. Hercule Poirot, his mustache impeccably trimmed and his gray cells humming with purpose, stood at the threshold of the grand library, where the scent of aged leather and polished oak mingled with an undercurrent of dread. The events of the past days, the poisoned financier, the strangled groundskeeper, the cryptic clues had woven a tapestry of intrigue that demanded his attention. Yet it was the sudden disappearance of Miss Eleanor Winthrop, the Manor's young heiress, that now sharpened his focus to a razor's edge. Eleanor, with her wide, inquisitive eyes and a demeanor that teetered between fragility and defiance, had been a fleeting, that vital presence at the gala. Her claim of glimpsing a cloaked figure near the crime scenes had sent ripples of unease through the guests, and now her absence felt like a thunderclap in the gathering storm. Poirot's instincts told him her disappearance was no mere coincidence. It was a thread in the intricate web of murder and deceit that he was determined to unravel. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy drapes of the library, casting long shadows across the room's towering bookshelves. Poirot's polished shoes clicked softly against the parquet floor as he surveyed the space, his gaze lingering on the ornate fireplace, its mantel adorned with a collection of porcelain figurines. The guests, summoned at his request, milled about in a state of restless agitation, their murmurs a low hum against the crackle of the fire. Lady Beatrice Haverford, the socialite whose secret affair had come to light, clutched a lace handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Lord Reginald Blackthorn, the Manor's brooding master, stood by a window, his face a mask of barely concealed frustration. The other guests, politicians, artists, and minor nobility, formed uneasy clusters, their voices tinged with suspicion. Monsieur Poirot, began Inspector Harold Grayson, the local constabulary's liaison, his tone gruff, but deferential. We've searched the grounds thrice over. No sign of Miss Winthrop. The stable boy swears the horses are untouched, and the footman found no tracks leading from the estate. It's as if she's vanished into thin air. Poirot tilted his head, his green eyes glinting with a quiet intensity. Non, Inspector. The air, it does not swallow young ladies whole. Miss Winthrop is somewhere, and it is our task to find her. The question is not where she is, but why she is gone. Was she taken, or did she flee? And if she fled, from whom or what? Grayson frowned, scratching his stubbled chin. You think she ran off? She seemed terrified last night, going on about that cloaked figure. Perhaps she saw something she wasn't meant to? Precisement, Poirot replied, his voice smooth as polished glass. But fear, it is a curious motivator. It can drive one to hide, or it can draw the hunter to the prey. We must consider both possibilities. He turned to the assembled. Yes, his small frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. Mesdames et messieurs, I require your cooperation. Miss Winthrop's disappearance is no isolated event. It is connected to the murders of Mr. Hargrove and Mr. Tillman. I ask that you remain within the manor until we have searched every corner. If anyone has knowledge of her whereabouts, now is the time to speak. A murmur of protest rippled through the crowd. Lady Beatrice stepped forward, her voice sharp. This is outrageous, Monsieur Poirot. Are we to be prisoners in this house? Eleanor was a nervous girl. Perhaps she simply wandered off in a panic. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, though his eyes remained unyielding. A wanderer does not vanish without a trace, Lady Beatrice. And a nervous girl does not leave behind her shawl, her gloves, and her reticule, all neatly arranged in her room, as if she intended to return. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling like dust. Lord Blackthorn cleared his throat, his voice low and strained. Poirot, I've known Eleanor since she was a child. She's impulsive, yes, but not foolish. If she's gone, someone must have taken her. I'll have my men scour the estate again. Nong, Nong, my lord, Poirot interjected, raising a hand. Your men, they are diligent, but they lack the method. Hercule Poirot will conduct this search himself. With the assistance of Inspector Grayson, we begin with Miss Winthrop's room, and then we explore the manors. Hidden corners. The heiress's bedroom was a study in contrasts. Delicate lace curtains framed windows that overlooked the sprawling grounds, while a heavy oak wardrobe loomed in one corner, its carvings depicting scenes of mythical beasts. Poirot moved with deliberate precision, his gloved hands tracing the edges of furniture, his eyes scanning for anomalies. Grayson followed, his notepad at the ready, though his expression betrayed a growing impatience. Nothing out of place, Grayson muttered, peering under the four-poster bed. No signs of a struggle. Her maid said she retired early last night, after her outburst about the cloaked figure. Poirot nodded, his attention fixed on a small writing desk by the window. A quill pen lay askew, its inkpot uncapped, as though Eleanor had been interrupted mid-thought. He lifted the blotter, revealing a single sheet of paper with a hurried sketch, a maze of interlocking lines, dotted with strange symbols that resembled stars and crescent moons. At the bottom, in Eleanor's looping script, were the words, "The path is hidden, but the truth lies within." Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his fingers brushing the paper. This is no idle doodle. It is a message, a map. Perhaps, the heiress. She knew something dangerous. Grayson leaned over, squinting at the sketch. Looks like gibberish to me. A labyrinth. There's no maze on the grounds. Nah, not on the grounds. Inspector, Poirot said, his voice low and thoughtful, but within the manor itself. Blackthorn Manor is old. Nong, old houses, they have secret passages, rooms, places where one might hide. Or be hidden. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket, then turned to the wardrobe. Its doors creaked open, revealing rows of silk gowns and velvet cloaks. Poirot's fingers paused on a shelf, where a small, leather-bound diary lay tucked behind a hat box. He opened it, his eyes scanning the pages. Eleanor's handwriting filled the book, a mix of daily musings and cryptic notes. One entry, dated the previous night, caught his attention. The cloaked figure moves like a shadow, always watching. I saw it again tonight, near the rose garden. It knows I know. The labyrinth holds the key, but I fear I'll never find it. If I disappear, look to the heart of the house. Poirot closed the diary, his expression grave. She knew she was in danger, he said softly, and yet, she left us this clue. The labyrinth, it is not a garden maze, but a metaphor for the manors. Secret passages. We must find them. Grayson's skepticism was palpable. Secret passages. This isn't some Gothic novel, Poirot. Blackthorn Manor's been in the family for centuries. Surely Lord Blackthorn would know of any hidden corridors. Perhaps, Poirot replied, his tone enigmatic. Or, perhaps the Lord. He keeps his own secrets. Come, Inspector, we have work to do. The search for the manor's hidden passages began in earnest, with Poirot and Grayson moving methodically through the sprawling estate. The guests, confined to the drawing-room under the watchful eye of a constable, whispered theories and accusations, their nerves fraying with each passing hour. Poirot, undeterred by their unrest, examined walls, tapped floorboards, and studied architectural oddities with a jeweler's precision. In the west wing, a narrow corridor lined with portraits of Blackthorn ancestors drew his attention. The paintings, their eyes seeming to follow him, depicted stern-faced men and women in ruffled collars and velvet robes. One portrait, of a woman with a striking resemblance to Eleanor, bore a plaque reading Lady Arabella Blackthorn, 1763. Poirot paused, noting the frame's unusual thickness. He pressed gently along its edges, and with a soft click, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a dark, Narrow passage, mon Dieu, Poirot exclaimed, his voice a mix of triumph and caution. The labyrinth begins. Grayson produced a lantern, its flickering light casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. The passage was damp and cold, its air thick with the scent of mildew. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling, and the floor was littered with dust undisturbed for decades. Poirot moved forward, his steps deliberate, his senses alert for any sign of Eleanor. The passage twisted and turned, branching into smaller tunnels that seemed to defy logic. At one junction, Poirot found a scrap of fabric caught on a jagged stone, a piece of Eleanor's shawl, its pale blue threads unmistakable. She was here, he said, holding the fabric to the light. But whether she came willingly or was brought, we cannot yet say. Deeper into the passage, they discovered a small alcove, its walls carved with the same star and crescent symbols from Eleanor's sketch. In the center of the alcove lay a single glove, its fine leather embroidered with the Blackthorn family crest, a raven clutching a rose. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he lifted it, turning it over in his hands. The crest of Blackthorn, he murmured. This glove, it belongs to someone of the family or someone who wishes us to believe so. The plot, it thickens. Inspector, Grayson shook his head, his frustration mounting. This is madness, Poirot. Secret passages, coded sketches, embroidered gloves, what does it all mean? Are we chasing a ghost? Not a ghost, Inspector, Poirot replied, his voice steady. A mind. A clever mind that weaves these clues to mislead, to distract. But Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily fooled. This glove, it is a message, but not the one the conspirator intends. We must return to the manor and speak with Lord Blackthorn. His crest, it cannot be a coincidence. The confrontation with Lord Blackthorn took place in the manor's study, a room lined with leather-bound tomes and dominated by a massive desk carved with the same Raven Andros motif. The lord stood by the fireplace, his face pale, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. Poirot held the glove aloft, its embroidery catching the firelight. This glove, my lord, Poirot began, his tone measured but piercing. It was found in a secret passage beneath your manor. A passage, I might add, that you did not mention. Care to explain? Blackthorn's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with something akin to fear. I had no idea such passages existed, he said, his voice strained. As for the glove, it's one of many. The crest is common among my household servants, cousins, even distant relatives might have one. Poirot's smile was thin, almost predatory. Common, perhaps, but convenient. Non, a glove bearing your crest, found in a hidden passage, near a scrap of Miss Winthrop's shawl. You will forgive me, my lord, if I find this coincidence improbable. Blackthorn's composure cracked, his hands trembling as he sank into a chair. Poirot, I swear to you, I know nothing of Eleanor's disappearance. She's like a daughter to me. If someone has taken her, I'll tear this manor apart to find her. Poirot studied him, his gray cells sifting through the lord's words, his posture, the flicker of his eyes. I believe you are sincere, my lord, he said at last. But sincerity, it is not proof. The passage, the glove, the heiress, they are pieces of a puzzle, and I suspect someone close to you knows more than they admit. He turned to Grayson, who stood by the door, his notepad forgotten. Inspector, we must widen our search. The village, the grounds, every outbuilding. Miss Winthrop is alive, I am certain of it. But she is in danger, and the cloaked figure she fears is no phantom, it is a person, cunning and ruthless. The day wore on, with Poirot and Grayson combing the manor's grounds and the nearby village for any trace of Eleanor. The guests, now confined to their rooms, grew increasingly volatile, their whispered accusations echoing through the halls. Poirot, undeterred, returned to the library, where he spread Eleanor's diary and sketch across a table, studying them with relentless focus. The labyrinth sketch, he realized, was not a literal map but a cipher, its symbols corresponding to locations within the manor. The star marked the library, the crescent the west wing, and a third symbol a coiled serpent pointed to the chapel, a crumbling structure on the estate's edge. Poirot's heart quickened. The chapel, rarely used, was the perfect hiding place. He summoned Grayson and a small team of constables, and together they ventured to the chapel, its weathered stones cloaked in ivy. Inside, the air was stale, the pews coated in dust. Poirot's eye scanned the altar, where a faint disturbance in the dust suggested recent activity. He knelt, his fingers tracing a seam in the floorboards. With a gentle push, a trapdoor creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Inspector," Poirot said, his voice low, "we are close. But we must be cautious. The cloaked figure, it may be near." The staircase led to a small chamber, its walls lined with ancient tapestries depicting scenes of sacrifice and betrayal. In the center stood a wooden chest, its lid ajar. Inside, Poirot found a bundle of letters, each sealed with the crimson wax from the gala's invitation. He opened one, his eyes scanning the elegant script. The pact must be honored, the heirs must fall. The manor belongs to those who guard its secrets. Poirot's breath caught. The letters confirmed his suspicion. A conspiracy, rooted in the manor's past, was targeting its heirs. Eleanor, as the last direct descendant, was the final piece. But the chamber was empty, save for the chest and a single, chilling clue. A hairpin, unmistakably Eleanor's, lying on the floor. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "She was here, but she is gone." The cloaked figure moved swiftly, but Hercule Poirot, he is swifter still. The chapter's climax came as Poirot emerged from the chapel, the hairpin clutched in his hand. The setting sun cast long shadows across the grounds, and a faint rustle in the nearby woods drew his attention. He motioned for Grayson to follow, his senses alert. In a clearing, they found fresh footprints, small, delicate, unmistakably Eleanor's, leading toward the village. But alongside them were larger prints, heavy and deliberate, suggesting pursuit. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues, the labyrinth sketch, the secret passage, the glove, the letters, the hairpin. The heiress had fled, but not alone. The cloaked figure was real, and it was hunting her. Yet the glove, with its blackthorn crest, pointed to someone within the manor's inner circle, a traitor hiding in plain sight. As night fell, Poirot returned to the manor, the hairpin and letters secured in his pocket. The guests, now gathered in the dining hall, watched him with a mix of fear and curiosity. He addressed them, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, Miss Winthrop lives, but she is in grave danger. The clues, they point to a conspiracy older than this manor itself. A glove, a passage, a letter, they are threads in a tapestry of betrayal. Hercule Poirot will find the heiress, and he will unmask the one who pulls the strings. For now, I ask only that you trust in my method." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over them like a shroud. Poirot's eyes lingered on Lord Blackthorne, whose clenched fist betrayed a turmoil he could not hide. The glove, Poirot knew, was a key, but not the lock. The true mastermind remained hidden, and the heiress's fate hung in the balance. The chapter closed with Poirot standing alone in the library, the fire casting flickering shadows across Eleanor's diary. He traced the labyrinth sketch with a finger, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The secret passage had yielded its first secret, but the manor held more. The cloaked figure, the crimson seal, the blackthorn crest, they were pieces of a puzzle that only Hercule Poirot could solve, and solve it he would, for the truth, like the heiress, could not remain hidden forever. Chapter 5. The crest of betrayal. Morning after the heiress's disappearance, Blackthorn Manor stood cloaked in an uneasy hush, its grand halls dimmed by the weight of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his mustache impeccably trimmed despite the chaos, paced the oak-paneled study, his little gray cells humming with purpose. The glove found in the hidden passage embroidered with the Blackthorn family crest pointed to Lord Cedric Blackthorn, the manor's brooding master. Yet Poirot, ever cautious, sensed the threads of this mystery wove a pattern far more intricate than a single suspect. The air was thick with the scent of old books and wax polish as Poirot summoned Lord Blackthorn for a private audience. The lord, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and eyes like storm clouds, entered with a stiff gait, his cane tapping a rhythm of barely concealed agitation. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, voice low, "this glove business is preposterous. I've not set foot in those passages since I was a boy." Poirot's eyes gleamed, sharp as a hawk's, "and yet, Monseigneur, the glove bears your crest. A curious coincidence. Non. Perhaps you will enlighten Poirot as to its origins." Lord Blackthorn's jaw tightened, his fingers curling around the cane's silver handle. "A griffin," Poirot noted, matching the crest. "That glove is decades old," he said. "It belonged to my father. Anyone could have taken it from the attic. This manor is a sieve for secrets." Poirot tilted his head, considering. "Secrets, oui, and feuds. Perhaps, tell me, Lord Blackthorn, of the enmity that festers within these walls. The manor's ownership, it is not uncontested, is it?" The lord's gaze flickered, a crack in his aristocratic armor. "You've done your homework, Poirot?" "Yes, there's bad blood. My cousin, Edmund, contested my inheritance 20 years ago. He claimed our grandfather's will was forged. He lost, of course, but the scandal clung like damp rot. And where is this Edmund now?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Dead," Blackthorn replied curtly. "A riding accident, 10 years past. His widow, Clara, lives in the village. She's harmless, a recluse now." Poirot nodded, filing the name away. "Harmless, perhaps, but the past, it has a way of reaching forward, does it not? This glove, this feud, there is a connection." I think, before Blackthorn could respond, a sharp rap at the door interrupted. It was Mrs. Haverford, the housekeeper, her face pale as chalk. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, you must come at once. We found something in the west wing." The west wing, a labyrinth of disused rooms, smelled of dust and neglect. Poirot followed Mrs. Haverford to a small chamber where a maid, trembling, pointed to a broken pocket watch on the floor. Its face was shattered, hands frozen at 3:15, and etched on the back was a single word, "Traitor." Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the engraving. "Curio," he murmured, "a message, but for whom?" Mrs. Haverford wrung her hands. "It was under the floorboards, sir. The maid was cleaning when she pried one loose by accident. There's more, look." She gestured to a small bundle of letters tied with twine, hidden beneath the same board. Poirot untied them with care, revealing correspondence dated 30 years prior. The letters, written in a spidery hand, spoke of a betrayal, a deal gone sour between the Blackthorn patriarch and an unnamed partner, threatening the manor's fortune. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This watch, these letters, they are no accident. Someone wishes us to see them, to stir the waters of suspicion." He turned to Mrs. Haverford. "Who has access to this wing?" "Only the family, sir, and the senior staff. But it's been locked for years, the keys kept in Lord Blackthorn's study." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet, the dust is disturbed. Someone has been here recently. Tell me, madame, does Lord Blackthorn ever speak of his cousin's widow, Clara?" Mrs. Haverford hesitated. "Not often, sir. But I've seen her at the gates sometimes, watching the manor. Gives me the shivers." "She does." That afternoon, Poirot ventured to the village, a quaint cluster of stone cottages nestled beneath rolling hills. Clara Edmonds lived in a modest house at the edge, its garden overgrown with ivy. She was a frail woman, her face etched with grief, but her eyes held a spark of defiance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, offering tea, "I heard about the murders. I want no part of that cursed manor." Poirot sipped the tea, noting its bitter edge. "Madame, the past clings to Blackthorn Manor like ivy to your walls. Tell me of your husband's claim to the estate." Clara's hands trembled. "Edmund was cheated. The will named him heir. but Cedric's father produced a new one, claiming it was the true document. We fought in court, but money buys justice. After Edmund died, I let it go. What use is a manor to a widow? And yet, Poirot said, you linger near its gates. Why? Her lips parted, then closed. Curiosity, she said finally. Or perhaps I'm a fool, hoping for truth. Poirot set down his cup. Truth, madame, is what I seek. In this watch he produced the broken pocket watch, watching her reaction as it stirred your memory. Clara's eyes widened, her breath catching. That was Edmund's. He carried it always. Where did you find it? In the manor, Poirot said, observing her closely. Hidden, with letters speaking of betrayal. Do you know of such a betrayal? Clara shook her head, but her hands betrayed her, twisting in her lap. Edmund never spoke of it, but he was angry, always, after we lost. He said the blackthorns played dirty. Poirot rose, bowing slightly. Merci, madame, you have been most illuminating. Back at the manor, Poirot confronted Lord Blackthorn again, this time in the library, where the fire cast long shadows. The watch, Monseigneur, belonged to your cousin Edmund. The letters speak of a deal betrayed. You will tell Poirot now what secret did your family bury? Blackthorn's face darkened. You're digging too deep. Poirot. Yes, there was a deal. My father and Edmund's planned to sell part of the estate to a mining company. It fell through bad terms, bad blood. Edmund blamed us, said we sabotaged it to keep the profits. It's ancient history. History, oui, Poirot said, but history that kills. The glove, the watch, the letters, they point to you. Yet I suspect you are not the puppet master. Someone uses your family shame to weave this web. Blackthorn sank into a chair, his cane clattering to the floor. If I'm not the killer, then who? I've lost my heiress, my peace, everything. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. Not everything, Monseigneur, but you must trust Poirot. There is a mastermind, one who knows your secrets and exploits them. Tell me, who in this manner knows of the feud? Only my adviser, Reginald Vance, Blackthorn said. He's been with me for years, privy to the family's affairs. Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his mind at work. Vance, oui, a loyal man, perhaps too loyal. I will speak with him. Reginald Vance was a wiry man with a pinched face, his spectacles glinting in the candlelight as Poirot found him in the estate office. Monsieur Vance, Poirot began, you are the keeper of secrets, are you not? The feud between the Blackthorns and Edmunds, what do you know? Vance adjusted his spectacles, his voice calm but guarded. I know what Lord Blackthorn has shared, a family squabble, nothing more. Why do you ask? Poirot produced the watch, watching Vance's reaction. This was found, hidden, with letters that suggest a deeper betrayal. You, as adviser, would know of such things? Non. Vance's composure faltered, his fingers twitching. I advised Lord Blackthorn's father during the dispute. It was a messy affair, but it's long over. Surely you don't think I think, monsieur, that someone stirs the ashes of this feud to burn the present, Poirot said. And you, with your knowledge, are well placed to do so. Vance stood, indignant. I'm loyal to this family, Poirot. I'd never harm them. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone unyielding. But loyalty can mask ambition. I will watch you, Monsieur Vance. That night, Poirot sat in his room, the glove, watch, and letters spread before him. The clues were deliberate, placed to incriminate Blackthorn. Yet Poirot's instinct screamed of misdirection. The mastermind was clever, using the manor's history to obscure their motive. Was it Clara, seeking revenge? Vance, hiding ambition? Or another, lurking in the shadows? A soft knock broke his reverie. It was the heiress's maid, Lily, her eyes wide with fear. Monsieur Poirot, I heard something in the west wing, whispers, like someone plotting. I didn't dare go closer. Poirot rose, his mind racing. Show me, Mademoiselle, in the west wing, the air was cold, the silence oppressive. Poirot listened, hearing nothing but the creak of the manor's bones. Yet, Lily's fear was real, and Poirot trusted instinct. He examined the room where the watch was found, noticing a faint scratch on the wall, a hidden panel. With a gentle push, it opened, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Poirot hesitated, then lit a candle. "Stay here, mademoiselle. Poirot will return." The staircase led to a small chamber, its walls lined with old ledgers. One caught his eye, a record of the mining deal, marked with a crimson seal identical to the invitation. Beside it was a single page, torn from a journal, with a chilling note: "The Blackthorns will pay for their greed." Poirot's heart quickened. The mastermind was no mere opportunist, but a planner, weaving the past into a deadly tapestry. Lord Blackthorn's confession had revealed a cover-up, but not murder. The true killer, Poirot realized, was an outsider, using the manor's secrets a weapon. As he emerged, Lily was gone, her shawl left on the floor. Poirot's pulse raced. The game was escalating, and the mastermind was watching. Satisfying end. Lord Blackthorn's confession had peeled back a layer of the manor's secrets, but the discovery of the crimson-sealed ledger and the ominous note shifted Poirot's focus. The killer was not within the family, but an outsider exploiting their shame. With Lily's sudden absence, Poirot knew the mastermind was closing in, and the next move would be his or theirs. Chapter 6. Whispers in the fog. A dense fog had descended upon Blackthorn Manor, cloaking the estate in a ghostly shroud that seemed to whisper secrets of its own. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. As Hercule Poirot stepped out into the misty morning, the manor's towering silhouette faded into the haze, its Gothic spires barely discernible, like the jagged teeth of some slumbering beast. The murders, the financier poisoned with a red rose, the groundskeeper strangled by the clock tower, had left the guests in a state of restless dread, their polished facades cracking under the weight of suspicion. Poirot, however, felt invigorated. The fog, to him, was not an obstacle but a canvas for clarity, where shadows revealed more than sunlight ever could. His polished shoes crunched against the gravel path as he made his way toward the village of Thornwick, a half-mile trek from the manor. The trail wound through gnarled oaks and past a crumbling stone wall, its mossy surface glistening in the damp. Poirot's destination was the home of Dr. Elias Varnholt, the reclusive scholar whose name had surfaced in hushed whispers among the staff. The groundskeeper's ledger, uncovered in Chapter 3, had mentioned Varnholt's fleeting visit to the manor years prior, tied to a mysterious consultation about an artifact. The Lord's confession in Chapter 5 had further piqued Poirot's interest, hinting at an outsider's hand in the manor's dark tapestry. Varnholt, it seemed, was a thread begging to be pulled. The village emerged from the fog like a watercolor painting, its thatched cottages and cobblestone lanes bathed in an eerie glow. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his mustache twitching as he noted the curious glances from villagers huddled under awnings. They knew of the manor's troubles. Gossip traveled faster than the wind in Thornwick, but their wary eyes suggested more than idle curiosity. Poirot's little gray cells hummed. The village hides something, he thought, and Varnholt is its keeper. Dr. Varnholt's cottage stood at the edge of Thornwick, a squat, ivy-choked structure with crooked shutters and a chimney puffing faint smoke. Poirot knocked, his gloved hand precise against the weathered door. No answer. He knocked again, sharper this time, and the door creaked open, unlatched. A faint scent of old books and candle wax wafted out, mingling with the fog's damp chill. "Bonjour, Dr. Varnholt," Poirot called, his voice cutting through the silence. "It is Hercule Poirot, come to discuss matters most urgent." A rustle from within, then a low voice, raspy as dry leaves. "Enter, monsieur, but tread lightly. The past does not welcome intruders." Poirot stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The cottage was a labyrinth of clutter. Towering bookshelves sagged under leather-bound tomes, their spines etched with occult symbols and languages Poirot recognized as Latin, Greek, and something older, perhaps Sumerian. Maps and parchments littered oak table, their edges curling like ancient relics. A single candle flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls, where strange diagrams, pentagrams, spirals, and cryptic runes were pinned like trophies. At the center of it all stood Dr. Elias Varnholt, a gaunt man in his 60s, his silver hair wild and his eyes glinting with a mix of wariness and defiance. He wore a threadbare waistcoat, stained with ink, and his fingers clutched a quill as if it were a weapon. "Monsieur Varnholt," Poirot began, his tone measured. "I am investigating the deaths at Blackthorn Manor. Your name, it has surfaced, and I believe you hold answers to questions most grave." Varnholt's lips curled into a thin smile. "The manor's curse claims its due, does it? I warned them years ago, but greed deafens the heart. What do you seek? Detective, absolution for their sins?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, unamused. "I seek the truth, monsieur. The financier, the groundskeeper, both dead, both linked to you through whispers of an artifact. A ruby pendant, perhaps, or something older, tied to the manor's shadowed history." Varnholt's hand trembled, the quill dropping to the table. "You tread dangerous ground, Poirot. The pendant is but a trinket, a distraction. The true curse lies deeper, in the bones of that accursed estate." He gestured to a map on the table, its surface marked with red ink, a crude outline of Blackthorn Manor's grounds, dotted with symbols: a crescent moon, a broken sword, a coiled serpent. "These mark the ley lines," Varnholt said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Ancient paths of power, converging beneath the manor. The pendant was forged to bind them, but it failed. Blood follows failure." Poirot studied the map, his mind racing. The symbols matched sketches in the heiress's diary from Chapter 4, though she had called them a labyrinth. "A metaphor, perhaps," he mused, "or a literal path hidden in plain sight." "You speak of curses, monsieur," Poirot said, "but murder is no work of spirits. Someone kills with purpose. You visited the manor in 1918, did you not? For what purpose?" Varnholt's eyes darted to a locked chest in the corner, then back to Poirot. "I was summoned to appraise an artifact, the pendant. The Lord's Father believed it held power, a key to wealth or ruin. I told him to destroy it, but he laughed. Fools always laugh." His voice grew bitter. "I left, but not before I saw the greed in their eyes. The Lord, the financier, even the groundskeeper, they sought to control what cannot be tamed." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Varnholt. "And now they are dead, or missing. You know more than you say. This map, where does it lead?" Varnholt hesitated, then traced a trembling finger to a symbol near the manor's northern boundary, a crypt, marked with a crimson star. "There," he whispered, "the heart of the curse. But beware, Poirot. The fog hides more than you know." The air grew colder, the candles flamed guttering, as if stirred by an unseen breath. Poirot's instinct screamed danger. He turned, his cane tapping the floor, and caught a glimpse of movement outside the window, a cloaked figure, vanishing into the fog. "Mon Dieu!" he exclaimed, rushing to the door. But the figure was gone, leaving only a faint footprint in the mud, its edges blurred by the mist. "Stay here, monsieur," Poirot ordered Varnholt, who had paled to ghostly white. "We are not alone." Poirot ventured into the fog, his senses sharp despite the blinding haze. The footprint led to a narrow path, winding toward the manor's northern edge. The air buzzed with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the distant caw of a crow as he neared the crypt. Its stone arch loomed like a sentinel, half buried in ivy. The door was ajar, a yawning blackness within. Poirot lit a match, its feeble glow revealing steps descending into darkness. Carved into the lintel was a single word: Eterna, eternal. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Poirot's match illuminated a stone sarcophagus, its lid etched with the same symbols from Varnholt's map. Beside it lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact. Poirot opened it, his eyes scanning the faded script. It spoke of a pact, forged in 1820 by the manor's founders, a vow to protect a hidden fortune, sealed with blood. The pendant, it seemed, was no mere jewel but a key to a vault, its location lost to time. The final entry, dated 1918, mentioned Varnholt's visit and a warning. The crimson shadow watches, a creak echoed behind him. Poirot spun, his match extinguishing. In the darkness, a low laugh, cold, deliberate, sent a chill down his spine. "You are clever, Poirot," a voice hissed, distorted by the crypt's acoustics. "But cleverness cannot outrun fate." Poirot gripped his cane, his voice steady. "Show yourself, coward. Hercule Poirot does not fear shadows." Silence. Then footsteps, retreating upward. Poirot relit his match, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. The journal was gone, snatched in the dark. He climbed the steps, emerging into the fog, but the figure had vanished. Only one clue remained, a single red petal, identical to the rose found with the financier's body, lying at the crypt's entrance. Back at Varnholt's cottage, Poirot found the scholar trembling, his eyes wide with terror. "It was him," Varnholt stammered, "the crimson shadow." "He knows I spoke to you." "Who is he?" Poirot demanded, his patience thinning. "I don't know," Varnholt cried. "A ghost, a demon, or worse, a man who believes he's both. He hunts those who seek the vault. The pendant is his obsession." Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The map, the crypt, the journal all pointed to a hidden truth, guarded by a killer who cloaked himself in myth. The crimson shadow was no specter but a calculated mind, weaving fear to protect a secret. Varnholt's fear was genuine, but his evasion suggested he knew more than he admitted. A pawn, perhaps, Poirot thought, or a player who has outstayed his welcome. "Monsieur Varnholt," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm, "you will accompany me to the manor. The truth lies there, and I will have it, fog or no fog." Varnholt protested, but Poirot's glare silenced him as they trudged back through the mist, the scholar clutching his coat against the cold. Poirot's mind churned. The crypt's journal had confirmed the pendant's significance, but the crimson shadow's theft of the journal suggested desperation. The killer was close, perhaps among the manor's guests, hiding behind a mask of civility. The red petal was a taunt, a challenge to Poirot's intellect. The manor loomed ahead, its windows glowing like eyes in the fog. Poirot paused, his eyes catching a faint glimmer in the Grasses silver cigarette case, engraved with the initials C.S. Crimson Shadow. He thought, or a careless coincidence. He pocketed it, his resolve hardening. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot would not be outplayed. As they entered the manor, the guests' anxious murmurs greeted them. The fog had trapped them, amplifying their fear. Poirot, however, felt a spark of triumph. The map's secret, the crypt's revelation, and the petal's taunt had brought him closer to the truth. The crimson shadow was no phantom but a man, and men could be caught. The stage was set for the next act, a masquerade ball, where masks would hide faces, but not motives. The fog lingered, but Poirot's mind was clear. The crypt had yielded its confession, but the thief had slipped through his fingers. The hunt for the crimson shadow would continue, and the manor's secrets would not remain buried for long. Chapter 7. The crypt's confession. Fog that had cloaked Blackthorn Manor for days seemed to thicken with each passing hour, as if the very air conspired to hide the truth from Hercule Poirot. The manor's grand halls, once alive with the clink of champagne flutes and the murmur of polite conversation, now echoed with suspicion and dread. The murders of the financier and the groundskeeper, coupled with the heiress's disappearance, had cast a pall over the estate, and Poirot's investigation had reached a critical juncture. His little gray cells hummed with the weight of the clues: a crimson wax seal, a torn photograph, a ledger of illicit dealings, a glove with the family crest, and a cryptic map uncovered in the reclusive scholar's home. Each piece pointed to a deeper conspiracy, one that seemed to pulse beneath the manor's ancient stones. Now, The map's symbols had led him to a hidden crypt, a place where the past might finally yield its secrets. The morning was damp and cold, the kind that seeped into the bones. Poirot stood at the edge of the manor's overgrown cemetery, his black patent leather shoes sinking slightly into the sodden earth. The crypt's entrance, half hidden by ivy and moss, loomed before him, a stone archway carved with faded runes that spoke of a time when Blackthorn Manor was more fortress than home. Captain Hastings, ever loyal but visibly uneasy, stood at his side, clutching a lantern that cast flickering shadows across the gravestones. Mon ami, Poirot said, adjusting his scarf with a fastidious flick, you look as if you expect a spectre to emerge from the fog. Courage, the dead do not harm us. It is the living we must fear. Hastings managed a weak smile. It's not the dead I'm worried about, Poirot. It's this place. It feels wrong. That scholar, Dr. Varnholt, and his talk of curses, it's got me rattled. Poirot's mustache twitched with amusement. Dr. Varnholt is a man of books and shadows, Hastings. His obsession with the occult is but a distraction. The truth lies not in curses, but in facts, and the facts, they lead us here. He tapped the map, now creased from careful study, its strange symbols glowing faintly in the lantern's light. The crypt's iron gate groaned as Hastings pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and decay, and the walls glistened with moisture. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, noting the faint scratches on the gate's lock crescent, deliberate, as if someone had forced entry not long ago. Interesting, he murmured. Someone has been here before us, and not for prayer. As they descended, the temperature dropped, and the lantern's light seemed to shrink, swallowed by the oppressive gloom. The crypt was a labyrinth of stone sarcophagi, their lids carved with effigies of long-dead lords and ladies. Cobwebs draped the corners like forgotten veils, and the silence was broken only by the drip of water somewhere in the distance. Poirot moved with purpose, his gloved hand tracing the symbols from the map onto the walls, searching for a match. Poirot, look, Hastings whispered, pointing to a sarcophagus in the far corner. Its lid was slightly askew, revealing a sliver of darkness within. Carved into the stone was a symbol identical to one on the map, a crescent moon pierced by a dagger. Biajou, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low but steady. This is no resting place. It is a vault of secrets. With effort, they slid the lid aside, revealing not a body, but a hollow chamber. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and brittle, and a small wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Poirot lifted the journal first, his fingers delicate as if handling a sacred relic. The cover bore the same crimson wax seal that had marked his invitation to the manor, its edges cracked but unmistakable. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed, opening the journal. The pages were filled with dense, elegant script, written in a hand that trembled with urgency. This is no ordinary diary. It is a confession. Hastings peered over his shoulder, his lantern casting light on the faded ink. Whose confession? One of the victims, Nong. Hastings. This is older, much older. Poirot's eyes scanned the text, his lips moving silently as he read. It speaks of a pact, a blood oath made by the original owners of Blackthorn Manor, a pact to protect a secret and to destroy those who would uncover it. The journal told a grim tale. In the 17th century, the Blackthorn family, desperate to secure their wealth amid civil war, had hidden a fortune in the manor's grounds, a treasure rumored to include a ruby pendant of immense value, said to be cursed. To ensure its safety, they formed a secret society, swearing to kill anyone who threatened their legacy. The journal's author, a guilt-ridden heir named Edmund Blackthorn, detailed the society's ruthless acts, including murders disguised as accidents, and his own fear that the pendant's curse was real. The final entry, dated 1698, ended abruptly. The crimson seal binds us still. I cannot escape its shadow. Poirot closed the journal, his expression grave. This pendant, it is the key. The Crimson Seal links it to our murders. The financier, the groundskeeper, they were not random victims. They were part of this legacy, or they knew too much. Before Hastings could respond, a soft clatter echoed through the crypt. Both men froze. The sound came again, a faint, deliberate tap, like a pebble striking stone. Poirot raised a finger to his lips, signaling silence, and gestured for Hastings to dim the lantern. In the near darkness, they heard it again, closer now, accompanied by the rustle of fabric. "Someone is here," Poirot whispered, his voice barely audible. He slipped the journal into his coat and picked up the wooden box, tucking it under his arm. With cat-like precision, he moved toward the sound, Hastings trailing nervously behind. They rounded a corner to find a figure crouched near another sarcophagus, a lantern of their own casting a faint glow. The figure was small, wiry, clad in a dark coat that blended with the shadows. Poirot cleared his throat, and the figure spun around, revealing the pale, nervous face of Mr. Clarence Whitby, the archaeologist's guest who had been skittish since the gala. "Mr. Whitby," Poirot said, his tone deceptively calm, "you have a curious habit of visiting crypts at dawn. May I inquire why?" Whitby's eyes darted between Poirot and Hastings, his hands trembling as he clutched a small trowel. "I wasn't stealing. I swear, I was looking for answers." Answers. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "Or, perhaps, you seek the ruby pendant mentioned in this journal." He held up the leather book, and Whitby's face drained of color. "How did you?" "No, you don't understand." Whitby's voice cracked. "I took it." "Yes, but I didn't mean harm. It's cursed, Mr. Poirot. I saw it in the Manor's library, hidden in a false book. I thought if I studied it, I could break the curse, save us all." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his skepticism. "A curse, you say? And yet you did not bring this pendant to me, the detective tasked with solving these crimes. Why, Mr. Whitby, did you keep it secret?" Whitby sank to his knees, his trowel clattering to the floor. "I was afraid. The pendant, it's tied to everything. The murders, the heiress's disappearance. I thought if I returned it to the crypt, the killings would stop." "Show it to me," Poirot commanded. Whitby fumbled in his coat, producing a small velvet pouch. From it, he drew a pendant, a ruby the size of a quail's egg, set in an intricate gold filigree that seemed to pulse in the lantern's light. Its beauty was undeniable, but there was something unsettling about it, as if it absorbed the light rather than reflected it. Poirot took the pendant, turning it over in his gloved hands. The filigree was engraved with tiny symbols, the same as those on the map and the crimson seal. "This is no mere jewel," he murmured. "It is a cipher, a key to the society's secrets." "But why, Mr. Whitby, did you return here? To hide it again?" Whitby shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "I heard someone following me last night. I thought if I put it back, they'd leave me alone. But it's too late. They know I took it, they?" Poirot's voice sharpened. "Who, Mr. Whitby?" Before Whitby could answer, a low, guttural sound echoed through the crypt, a heavy thud, like a stone shifting. Poirot spun around, but the shadows seemed to close in, the lantern's light faltering. "Hastings, the lantern," he barked. Hastings fumbled with the wick, but it was too late. A figure cloaked in black emerged from the darkness, swift and silent, knocking the lantern from Hastings's hand. The glass shattered, plunging the crypt into near total darkness. Whitby screamed, and Poirot felt a rush of air as the figure lunged past him. He thrust the pendant into his pocket and seized Whitby's arm, pulling him toward the staircase. "Run, Hastings!" Poirot shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The three stumbled up the steps, the sound of pursuit close behind. They burst into the cemetery, the fog swallowing them as they ran. The cloaked figure did not follow, but Poirot could feel their presence, a malevolent shadow lingering just out of sight. Back in the Manor's library, Poirot examined the pendant under better light, Hastings and Whitby watching anxiously. The ruby's facets seemed to shift, revealing a faint inscription within the stone itself, a list of names, barely visible, etched in microscopic detail. Poirot's magnifying glass confirmed it. The names of the financier, the groundskeeper, and the missing heiress were among them, alongside others he did not yet recognize. This pendant, Poirot said, his voice steady despite the morning's ordeal, is not cursed, Mr. Whitby. It is a record, a ledger of those marked by the secret society. But it has been stolen again, has it not? When the figure attacked, you no longer held the pouch. Whitby nodded, his face ashen. They took it. I tried to hold on, but they were too fast. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. Then we have a conspirator among us, one who moves like a phantom. But phantoms leave traces, and Hercule Poirot will find them. The archaeologist's confession had cracked open the case, but the theft of the pendant confirmed an active enemy within the manor's walls. The Crimson Seal, the Society's pact, and the Ruby's secrets were converging, and Poirot knew the next move would bring him closer to the heart of the mystery or to a deadly reckoning. Chapter 8. The masquerade's mask there in Blackthorn Manor thrummed with anticipation, heavy with the scent of jasmine and candle wax, as the grand ballroom transformed into a stage for deception. The masquerade ball, proposed by the Manor's lord to honor the late financier and groundskeeper, was a glittering facade allure to draw out the thief who had stolen the ruby pendant. Hercule Poirot, his sharp eyes glinting behind a silver Venetian mask, moved through the crowd like a shadow, his mind a whirl of calculation. The pendant, he knew, was the key to the murders, its crimson facets hiding secrets that pulsed like a heartbeat. Tonight, he would unmask not just a thief, but a conspirator in a deadly game. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across silk gowns and velvet cloaks, their reflections dancing on polished marble floors. Yes, their identities cloaked by elaborate masked peacock feathers, gilded filigree, and grotesque harlequins whispered and laughed, their voices a symphony of secrets. Poirot, disguised as a French nobleman in a midnight blue doublet, blended seamlessly, his small stature and deliberate gait betraying nothing of his purpose. His little gray cells, however, were alight, sifting through the evening's clues, the stolen pendant, the cryptic journal from the crypt, and the looming presence of a mastermind orchestrating the manor's chaos. He paused near a towering ice sculpture of a swan, its wings glistening as they melted into a silver basin. His gaze swept the room, noting the nervous flutter of Lady Eleanor's fan, the financier's widow, whose sapphire mask could not hide her darting eyes. Across the floor, the reclusive scholar, Dr. Mortimer, adjusted his crow-like mask, his fingers twitching as if tracing invisible runes. And then there was the foreign diplomat, Count Victor Dragomir, whose lion mask and broad shoulders commanded attention as he held court near the orchestra. Poirot's instincts prickled. Dragomir's charm was too polished, his laughter too calculated. Mon ami, Poirot murmured to himself, the mask does not hide the man. It reveals him. He sipped a glass of champagne, the bubbles sharp against his tongue, and recalled the crypt's journal. Its faded pages had spoken of a ruby pendant, a relic tied to a pact sealed in blood, a pact that bound the manor's original owners to a fortune buried in deceit. The pendant's theft, just hours after the archaeologist's confession, was no coincidence. Someone in this room knew its true power. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and the floor became a swirl of color. Poirot declined a dance with a giggling debutante, her butterfly mask askew, and instead positioned himself near a velvet-draped alcove. From here, he could observe the manor's lord, Sir Reginald Blackthorn, resplendent in a golden mask shaped like a stag's head. Sir Reginald's grief over the missing heiress, his niece Clara, had seemed genuine, but Poirot had learned long ago to trust no one's tears. Beside him stood his adviser, Mr. Clarence Hawthorne, whose plain black domino mask contrasted with his sharp, fox-like gaze. Hawthorne's quiet authority unnerved Poirot. The man spoke little but saw everything. A sudden hush fell over the crowd as the manor's butler, Mr. Grayson struck a gong. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying over the dying notes of the waltz, "a special performance awaits in the garden pavilion. Please proceed through the terrace doors." The guests murmured excitedly, their masks glinting. As they moved toward the French doors, Poirot's pulse quickened. The pavilion, surrounded by dense rose hedges, was isolated a perfect stage for a thief to strike or a trap to be sprung. He slipped through the crowd, his eyes catching a flash of crimson near the terrace. A woman in a scarlet gown, her mask adorned with raven feathers, moved with purpose toward the garden. Poirot followed, his steps silent on the dew-kissed grass. The pavilion loomed ahead, a glass-domed structure aglow with lanterns, its shadows twisting like specters. Inside, a troupe of acrobats performed, their bodies weaving through silken ribbons suspended from the ceiling. The guests clapped, entranced, but Poirot's focus remained on the scarlet-gowned woman. She lingered near a marble statue of Aphrodite, her gloved hand brushing her reticule, a small, beaded bag that seemed too heavy for mere trinkets. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said softly, approaching her. She turned, her raven mask tilting, revealing only the curve of a painted lip. "The night is full of beauty, yet you seem preoccupied." Her laugh was low, like velvet. "And you, monsieur, seem more curious than most." Her accent was faint, Eastern European perhaps, but practiced. "I am merely admiring the artistry." "Artistry, oui," Poirot said, his eyes locking onto hers. "But some treasures are more illuminating than others. A ruby, perhaps." Her posture stiffened, a flicker of alarm betraying her composure. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the pavilion's entrance. A masked guest, a man in a jester's motley, stumbled forward, clutching his chest. The crowd gasped as he collapsed, a small object tumbling from his hand. Poirot darted forward, his heart racing. The object glinted in the lantern light, the ruby pendant, its crimson facets winking like blood. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot knelt beside the man, whose breathing was shallow. The jester's mask slipped, revealing the pale face of Count Dragomir. A pinprick of blood marked his neck, a sign of a subtle poison. Poirot's mind raced. The pendant had been planted, a deliberate act to frame the diplomat. He scanned the crowd, spotting the scarlet-gowned woman slipping toward the rose hedges. "Arades," he called, but she vanished into the shadows. The guests erupted in panic, their masks no longer festive but grotesque. Sir Reginald barked orders to secure the pavilion, while Lady Eleanor fainted into a chair. Poirot, undeterred, examined the pendant. Its clasp was intact, but a faint scratch suggested it had been opened recently. He pocketed it, his fingers brushing a folded paper tucked inside a forged letter, written in a hurried script, accusing Dragomir of espionage for a foreign power. The letter was too convenient, its ink too fresh. Poirot's lips curled, a distraction, he muttered. "The true pendant remains hidden." He rose, addressing the crowd with calm authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, remain here. The police will be summoned, but Hercule Poirot will find the truth before they arrive." He turned to Sir Reginald. "The pavilion must be searched. Every corner, every shadow." The search yielded nothing but whispers and suspicion. Poirot's attention returned to the scarlet-gowned woman, whose absence gnawed at him. He recalled her reticule, its weight suggesting more than cosmetics. Slipping outside, he followed the path to the rose hedges, where a faint rustle betrayed movement. There, beneath a thorned bush, lay a discarded raven mask and a beaded reticule. Inside the bag, Poirot found a velvet pouch and, within it, a second ruby pendant. His breath caught. This one was heavier, its facets engraved with a faint cipher, invisible unless held to the light. "C'est magnifique," Poirot whispered, turning the pendant. The cipher matched the cryptic sketches in Clara's diary, a pattern of interlocking spirals. But, as he studied it, a shadow loomed behind him. He spun, facing Mr. Hawthorne, whose black mask was gone, his eyes cold as steel. "You are too clever, Monsieur Poirot," Hawthorne said, his voice low. "That pendant belongs to the manor, does it, monsieur?" Poirot replied, his tone light, but his grip firm on the pendant. Or does it belong to the one who pulls the strings of this deadly masquerade? Hawthorne lunged, but Poirot sidestepped, his agility belying his age. A scuffle ensued, thorns tearing at Poirot's doublet as he wrestled the advisor to the ground. The pendant slipped from his hand, rolling into the grass. Before Hawthorne could reach it, Sir Reginald appeared, his stag mask discarded, his face pale with shock. "Clarence, what is this madness?" Hawthorne froze, his defiance crumbling. "It was for the manor," he hissed, "for its legacy." Poirot retrieved the pendant, his eyes never leaving Hawthorne. "The legacy of murder. Nong, you planned it. The false pendant on Dragomir. But this is the true key." The police arrived, summoned by the butler, and Hawthorne was detained. Dragomir, revived but shaken, swore the pendant was slipped into his pocket during the waltz. Poirot nodded, his mind already racing ahead. The true pendant cipher held the next clue, but its theft and the forged letter confirmed a chilling truth. The mastermind was still at large, their identity hidden behind a mask no one had yet seen. As the guests dispersed, their laughter replaced by whispers of fear, Poirot stood alone in the pavilion, the real pendant in his hand. The masquerade had unmasked a thief, but the killer's face remained shrouded. The ruby's cipher would lead him to the truth, but only if he could outwit a shadow that danced just beyond his grasp. Satisfying end. The diplomat is detained, but Poirot realizes the pendant is a decoy, and the real one holds the key to the murders. The discovery of the true pendant cipher sets the stage for the next chapter, while Hawthorne's betrayal deepens the conspiracy, leaving Poirot one step closer to the elusive mastermind. Chapter 9. The crimson cipher's air in Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with suspicion, as if the very walls whispered secrets too perilous to be spoken aloud. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand library, its towering shelves of leather-bound tomes, casting long shadows across the polished oak floor. The ruby pendant, recovered from the diplomat's possession during the masquerade ball, lay before him on a velvet-lined table, its intricate engravings glinting in the flickering light of a single candelabra. The pendant was no mere trinket, it was a key, a cipher, a deadly puzzle that had already claimed lives. Poirot's gray cells hummed with anticipation, for he knew this night would bring him closer to the heart of the manor's sinister conspiracy. The room was silent save for the faint ticking of a grandfather clock, its pendulum slicing through the tension like a metronome. Poirot's fingers, delicate yet precise, traced the pendant's surface. The engravings were not random flourishes, but a deliberate code, a labyrinth of lines and curves that seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. He had seen such ciphers before during his time in Brussels, unraveling a smuggling ring's coded ledgers, but this was different. This cipher was personal, tied to the crimson seal that had first drawn him to Blackthorn Manor, and it bore the weight of blood. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his mustache twitching as he leaned closer. "You are a clever one, n'est-ce pas?" But Hercule Poirot is clever still. He adjusted his pince-nez and began sketching the pendant's design onto a sheet of parchment, his strokes as meticulous as a surgeon's. The engravings formed a series of interlocking spirals, each intersected by angular runes that suggested a language older than the manor itself. As he worked, his mind replayed the events of the past days, the financier's poisoned corpse clutching a red rose, the groundskeeper strangled at midnight, the heiress's disappearance, and the web of lies spun by the manor's elite. The pendant was the thread that tied them together, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. A soft knock at the library door interrupted his thoughts. Captain Hastings, ever loyal but perpetually baffled, poked his head inside. His face was flushed, his tie slightly askew, a sure sign he had been pacing the corridors, wrestling with the case's complexities. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings said, his voice a mix of excitement and unease, "I've just spoken with the butler. He swears he saw someone tampering with the chandelier in the ballroom before the masquerade. Thinks it might have been meant to fall on someone, perhaps you. Poirot raised an eyebrow, his expression unperturbed. The chandelier, mon ami, a dramatic gesture, but ineffective. The killer knows that Hercule Poirot does not meet his end beneath falling crystal. No, this is a distraction. Our true enemy lies within this pendant. Hastings frowned, stepping closer to peer at the ruby. You really think that bauble holds the answers? Looks like something my aunt would wear to a garden party. Your aunt, mon cher, would not wear a cipher that names the dead, Poirot replied, his tone sharp, but not unkind. Observe the engravings. They are not mere decoration, but a message, a list perhaps, written in a code that requires both intellect and intuition to decipher. Hastings squinted at the pendant, then shook his head. I'll take your word for it. But what about the diplomat? He had the thing in his pocket. Surely he's our man. Poirot waved a dismissive hand. The diplomat, he is a pawn. N'est-ce pas? The pendant was placed upon him to mislead us. The true mastermind is more cunning, more patient. But fear not, Hastings Poirot is closing the net. He returned to his sketch, his mind a whirlwind of connections. The pendant spirals reminded him of a Celtic knot he had seen in a Dublin museum, a symbol of eternity and binding. But the runes were unfamiliar, possibly derived from an obscure alchemical text. He recalled the scholar's home, filled with occult books, and the map marked with symbols. Could the cipher be a variation of a hermetic code, used by secret societies to guard their secrets? As he pondered, the library door creaked open again, and Lady Eleanor Blackthorne entered, her silk gown rustling like autumn leaves. The Manor's mistress was a vision of composure, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted to the pendant before meeting his gaze. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice smooth but laced with urgency, I trust you're making progress. The guests are growing restless, and I fear another tragedy if this matter ain't resolved soon. Poirot inclined his head, his eyes never leaving hers. Rest assured, madame, Hercule Poirot does not rest until justice is served. But I am curious, why does the sight of this pendant unsettle you so? Lady Eleanor's lips parted, then closed. She forced a smile. It's merely a family heirloom, nothing more. I was surprised to see it in the diplomat's possession. An heirloom, oui, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. Yet it carries a weight far greater than its beauty. Tell me, madame, have you ever seen these engravings before? She hesitated, and Poirot's keen eyes caught the flicker of fear in her expression. I may have seen similar designs in my father's study, years ago. He was fond of antiquities that name the dead. Perhaps, Poirot pressed, holding up his sketch, this pendant, madame, is no mere keepsake. It is a key to a conspiracy that has claimed lives within your walls. Lady Eleanor paled, but held her ground. You speak in riddles, Monsieur Poirot. If you have accusations, make them plainly. Poirot smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of his lips. Accusations? Non, madame. Hercule Poirot accuses only when the truth is fully revealed. But I will say this, the pendant speaks, and it names those who are marked by the crimson shadow. She stiffened at the mention of the name, a whispered rumor among the guests, a cloaked figure, a specter of death. Before she could respond, a crash echoed from the hallway, followed by a muffled cry. Hastings bolted for the door, Poirot following, at a measured pace, his mind already racing. In the corridor, they found a maid, Clara, sprawled on the floor, a tray of shattered teacups at her feet. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with terror. I saw it, she gasped, the shadow. In the east wing, near the portrait gallery. Poirot knelt beside her, his voice calm but commanding. Describe this shadow, Mademoiselle Clara, every detail, s'il vous plaît. It was tall, cloaked, with a hood, she stammered. It moved like a ghost, holding something red, like blood. It vanished into the wall. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A secret passage, perhaps, like the one he had found earlier. He helped Clara to her feet, then turned to Hastings. Mon ami, gather the guests in the drawing room. No one leaves the manor tonight. The crimson shadow grows bold, and Poirot will meet boldness with brilliance. As Hastings hurried off, Poirot returned to the library, his focus razor-sharp. The maid's sighting was no coincidence, it was a taunt, a challenge from the killer. He resumed his work on the cipher, his fingers flying across the parchment as he cross-referenced the runes with a mental catalogue of codes. Hours passed, the candles burning low, until at last, a pattern emerged. The spirals were a grid, the runes coordinates, and together they formed a list of names, 6 in total, including the financier, the groundskeeper, and the missing heiress, Charlotte Blackthorne. Sacre bleu, Poirot whispered, his heart quickening. The pendant is a death list, but the list was incomplete. 2 names were unfamiliar, and one was smudged, as if deliberately obscured. Poirot's mind raced. The smudged name could be the killer's, hidden to protect their identity. He needed another clue, another piece of the puzzle. A soft rustle behind him made him turn. The library was empty, but a curtain swayed slightly, as if touched by an unseen hand. Poirot's hand tightened around his cane, his senses alert. "Show yourself," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Hercule Poirot does not play games with shadows. No one emerged, but a faint scent lingered, lavender, sharp and distinct. Poirot's memory sparked. The same scent had clung to the blood-stained handkerchief he had found near the groundskeeper's body. He moved to the curtain, pulling it aside to reveal a small alcove. On the floor lay a crumpled note, written in a hurried hand. The crimson shadow sees all. Trust no one. Poirot's lips curled into a grim smile. The killer was close, too close, and their desperation was showing. He pocketed the note and returned to the pendant, determined to crack the cipher's final secret. The smudged name was the key, but it required a different approach, a chemical one. Perhaps, to reveal the ink beneath, he summoned the manor's chemist, Dr. Mortimer, a nervous man with a penchant for secrecy. Poirot had suspected him earlier, but his alibi had held. Now, he needed the doctor's expertise. "Dr. Mortimer," Poirot said, holding up the pendant. "This smudge, can you restore it? A name lies hidden, and it may save lives." The doctor's hands trembled as he examined the pendant under a magnifying glass. "It's possible," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll need my kit. Lemon extract and ultraviolet light might do it." They worked through the night, the library a cocoon of tension. As dawn broke, the smudge name began to emerge. Dr. Elias Thorne. Poirot's breath caught. Thorne was a guest, a disgraced physician who had arrived late to the gala, claiming to be a distant cousin of the Blackthorns. His quiet demeanor and medical knowledge had made him unremarkable to unremarkable. Poirot confronted Thorne in the drawing room, where the guests were gathered, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. "Dr. Thorne," Poirot said, his voice resonant, "you are a man of secrets. Nong. This pendant names you, but not as a victim, as a conspirator." Thorne's eyes widened, his composure cracking. "You're mistaken, Poirot. I'm no killer." "Then explain the handkerchief," Poirot said, producing the blood-stained cloth. "It bears your scent, lavender, the same as the note left for me tonight. And your name, hidden in the cipher, marks you as part of this deadly game." The room erupted in gasps, but Thorne's reaction was unexpected. He sank into a chair, his face crumpling. "I'm not the killer," he whispered. "I'm a target, the crimson shadow. It's not me. It's someone else. Someone who knows my past." Poirot studied him, his gray cells working overtime. Thorne's fear was genuine, but his past disgraced for unethical experiments made him a perfect scapegoat. The true killer was using him, just as they had used the diplomat. The crimson shadow was a master of misdirection, and Poirot was one step behind Dot. As the guests dispersed, whispering among themselves, Poirot returned to the library, the pendant heavy in his pocket. The cipher had revealed a truth, but not the Whole truth, the Crimson Shadow was still out there, watching, waiting. And Poirot knew the next move would be his or the killer's. The chapter closed with Poirot standing alone, the pendant glinting in his hand, a silent promise that he would unmask the shadow before another life was lost. Chapter 10. The silent witness fog that had cloaked Blackthorn Manor for days lingered like a shroud, its tendrils curling through the village of Thornwick, where Hercule Poirot now stood. The revelation of the crimson cipher in the ruby pendant had shaken the investigation to its core. A list of names, including the murdered financier Lord Harrow, the strangled groundskeeper, and the missing heiress, Evelyn Blackthorn. Each name was a thread in a deadly tapestry, woven by a mastermind, known only as the Crimson Shadow. Poirot's little gray cells thrummed with anticipation, for the heiress, long thought lost, had been found alive hiding in the village, trembling with fear of this shadowy figure. Her whispered account of a cloaked menace had set the stage for Poirot's boldest move yet, a trap to lure the killer into the open. The village was a cluster of stone cottages, their chimneys puffing smoke into the gray dawn. Poirot, clad in a heavy overcoat against the damp chill, stood outside the Rose and Thorn Inn, where Evelyn had been secreted away by a loyal housemaid. The inn's sign creaked in the wind, its painted rose eerily reminiscent of the crimson, clues littering the case. Inside, Evelyn sat by a crackling fire, her pale face framed by dark curls, her hands clutching a worn shawl. She was no older than 20, yet her eyes held the weight of a lifetime's fear. "Mademoiselle Blackthorn," Poirot began, his voice soft yet commanding, "you are safe now, under my protection, but the truth, it is the only shield that will hold. Tell me again of this crimson shadow you saw." Evelyn's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "It was at the manor, 2 nights ago. I was in the library, looking for something to calm my nerves. I saw a figure by the window, cloaked in black, with a red scarf. They were watching me, Monsieur Poirot. I ran, hid in the passages, and fled to the village. They knew I'd seen them. They threatened my life." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A red scarf, you say?" Set interested. "And this figure? Did they speak? Did you see their face?" She shook her head, tears welling. "No face, no voice, just eyes, cold and sharp, like a hawk's. They left a note under my door later, in crimson ink, 'Speak,' and you joined the others. I couldn't stay at the manor after that." Poirot produced the ruby pendant, its intricate design glinting in the firelight. "This pendant, mademoiselle, contains a cipher, a list of names, yours among them. Do you know why?" Evelyn's breath caught. "My father, he spoke of a pact, years ago, with the manor's founders. Something about a hidden fortune, tied to the land. I thought it was just a story, but Lord Harrow, he was pressing father about it before he died. Maybe I was next." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The pact, mentioned in the crypt's ancient journal, was no mere legend. It was the heart of the conspiracy, a motive for murder that spanned generations. But the Crimson Shadow's identity remained elusive, a specter manipulating events from the shadows. Poirot needed to draw them out, and Evelyn, the silent witness, was the perfect bait. "Mademoiselle," he said, his tone resolute, "we must return to the manor. The Crimson Shadow believes you are silenced by fear, but we shall turn their confidence into their undoing. I propose a trap, a staged return, where you are seen, vulnerable, but protected. Will you trust Hercule Poirot?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded, her jaw set. "If it stops this nightmare, I'll do it." The plan was meticulous, as all Poirot's schemes were. He enlisted Captain Hastings, his loyal friend, who had arrived in Thornwick that morning, summoned by an urgent telegram. Hastings, ever eager, was stationed at the manor's gatehouse with 2 local constables, disguised as groundskeepers. Poirot instructed the innkeeper, a gruff man named Mr. Tuttle, to spread word in the village that Evelyn had been found and was returning to the manor that evening. The bait was set. The Crimson Shadow would hear of it, and curiosity or desperation would draw them out. As dusk fell, Poirot and Evelyn rode in a hired carriage back to Blackthorn Manor, the fog parting like a curtain to reveal its looming silhouette. The manor's windows glowed like watchful eyes, and the air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and roses. Poirot had arranged for Evelyn to enter through the main hall, where the remaining guests, Lady Beatrice, Captain Drake, Sir Edmund, and the nervous archaeologist Dr. Marrow were gathered for dinner. The stage was set for a performance, and Poirot was the director. Inside, the dining hall was a tableau of strained civility. Lady Beatrice, resplendent in sapphire silk, toyed with her wine glass, her affair with Captain Drake now a guarded secret known to Poirot. Drake, seated beside her, kept his eyes on his plate, his earlier bravado dimmed. Sir Edmund grumbled about the infernal delays in the investigation, while Dr. Marrow, clutching a napkin, darted glances at the door. The lord of the manor, Lord Blackthorn, sat at the head, his face haggard, the weight of his family's secrets etched in every line. Evelyn's entrance was timed for maximum effect. As the clock struck 8, she stepped into the hall, her shawl slipping to reveal her pale, determined face. A gasp rippled through the room. Lord Blackthorn rose, his voice breaking. "Evelyn, my child, you're alive." Poirot, standing discreetly by the doorway, watched the guests' reactions. Lady Beatrice's hand froze mid-sip, her eyes narrowing. Drake's jaw tightened, a flicker of relief or guilt crossing his face. Sir Edmund coughed into his napkin, while Dr. Marrow's fork clattered to the table. "One of you," Poirot thought, "knows more than you show." "Mademoiselle Blackthorn has returned," Poirot announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "She has been hiding, fearing for her life, but fear no longer holds her. She has seen the crimson shadow, and tonight we shall unmask this phantom." The room erupted in whispers, but Poirot raised a hand. "Mesdames et messieurs, remain calm. The constables are near, and I, Hercule Poirot, am watching. Let us dine, and let the truth reveal itself." Dinner proceeded, an uneasy charade. Evelyn, seated beside her father, spoke little, her eyes scanning the room. Poirot, positioned near a window, kept his senses sharp. The trap depended on the crimson shadow's arrogance. They would act, believing Evelyn's return threatened their plans. Outside, Hastings and the constables patrolled the grounds, their lanterns dimmed to avoid detection. As the dessert course was served, a faint noise, a scrape, like a boot on stone, came from the terrace. Poirot's head turned, his heart quickening. "Pardonnez-moi," he said, rising. "A small matter requires my attention." He slipped through the French doors, his cane tapping softly, and melted into the shadows. The terrace was deserted, the fog swirling like a living thing. Poirot's eyes, accustomed to the dark, caught a flicker of movement near the rose garden. A cloaked figure, the red scarf vivid against the black, darted toward the library wing. The crimson shadow, he thought, his pulse racing. He signaled to Hastings, who emerged from the gatehouse, his lantern casting a faint glow. Poirot followed the figure, his steps silent on the damp grass. The library window was ajar, a faint light spilling out. He peered inside, seeing the figure rifling through a desk, papers scattering like leaves. A glint of metal caught his eye, a dagger, tucked into the figure's belt. "Mon Dieu," he thought, "they mean to kill again." He entered through the window, his voice sharp. "Arrades, you are caught, monsieur or madame. Step into the light and let us see the face of the crimson shadow." The figure froze, then turned, the scarf slipping to reveal nothing. The hood was empty, a clever disguise propped on a mannequin, rigged to move by pulleys. Poirot's heart sank. A decoy. The real crimson shadow was elsewhere, and Evelyn was in danger. He raced back to the dining hall, bursting through the doors to find chaos. Evelyn was gone, her chair overturned, a crimson note pinned to the table with a dagger. The guests were shouting, Lord Blackthorn clutching his chest. The note read, "The silent witness speaks no more." The attic, midnight. Poirot's mind raced, The attic, the coded messages meeting place. The Crimson Shadow had outmaneuvered him, but not entirely. He rallied the constables, ordering a search of the manor, and turned to the guests. Mesdames et messieurs, remain here. The killer is close, and I will find them, with Hastings at his side. Poirot climbed the manor's winding staircase, the air growing colder with each step. The attic was a warren of cobwebs and crates, lit by a single lantern. As midnight approached, Poirot heard a faint creak of floorboard, betrayed by weight. He gestured to Hastings, who flanked the sound. Revolver drawn, a shadow moved, and Poirot pounced, his cane pinning a cloaked arm. "Ah, sais," he cried. "Show yourself." The figure struggled, then slipped free, the cloak falling to reveal nothing but air. Another decoy, this time a weighted cape triggered by a hidden mechanism. But a crumpled paper fell from the cloak, its crimson ink stark against the dusty floor. Poirot seized it, his eyes scanning the coded text. The attic is a lie. The chapel holds the truth. Poirot's heart pounded. The Crimson Shadow was playing a game of chess, and he was one move behind. But the code was cracked, its meaning clear. The chapel, where the pendant and the pack's secrets lay. The killer had lured him here to delay him, but Poirot was not defeated. Satisfying end. Poirot deciphered the Crimson Shadow's coded message, revealing the true meeting place in the manor's abandoned chapel. Though the killer escaped, the trap had yielded a vital clue, tightening the net around the mastermind. Evelyn, found unharmed in a locked guest room, confirmed the Crimson Shadow's presence, her courage bolstering Poirot's resolve to confront the killer in the chapel, where the mystery's heart awaited. Chapter 11. Attic of ambush. Fog that had clung to Blackthorn Manor like a jealous lover began to lift, revealing a sky bruised with the promise of dawn. Hercule Poirot, his coat dusted with attic cobwebs, stood at the threshold of the manor's uppermost floor, his heart pounding with the thrill of the chase. The Crimson Shadow's latest ruse, a decoy cloak and a coded note pointing to the chapel, had nearly outwitted him, but Poirot's little gray cells were ablaze. The note, in its crimson scrawl, had declared the attic a lie, yet here he was, drawn back to this shadowed warren by a nagging instinct. The chapel was the killer's feint, he now suspected, designed to lure him away from the true heart of the conspiracy. The attic held secrets, documents, perhaps, or the Crimson Shadow themselves, and Poirot was determined to unmask them before another life was lost. The attic stairs creaked under his polished shoes, each step a deliberate act of defiance against the darkness. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, followed close behind, his revolver glinting faintly in the lantern's glow. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood, but Poirot's senses were sharp, attuned to the faintest whisper of movement. The coded message had been a taunt, but the decoy cloak's mechanism, a pulley rigged with fishing line, suggested a mind both cunning and desperate. The Crimson Shadow was no phantom. They were human, fallible, and close. Poirot, Hastings, whispered, his voice taut. "Are you sure about this?" The note said the chapel. "Mon ami," Poirot interrupted, his voice slow but firm. "The chapel is a distraction, a move in the grand chess game. The attic is where the truth hides, like a jewel in a locked box. Attention. We are not alone." They reached the attic door, its rusted hinges groaning as Poirot eased it open. The vast space was a labyrinth of crates, draped furniture, and shadows that danced in the flickering light. Cobwebs hung like lace, and the air carried a faint metallic tang, blood, perhaps, or something more sinister. Poirot's cane tapped softly, probing the floor for traps, while his eyes scanned for clues. The note's words echoed in his mind. The attic is a lie. But lies, he knew, often cloaked the deepest truths. "Hastings," Poirot murmured, "guard the door. If the Crimson Shadow is here, they will not escape." Hastings nodded, taking position by the entrance, his eyes darting nervously. Poirot moved deeper, his lantern casting long shadows. Near a stack of trunks, he spotted a disturbance in the dust, a footprint, too fresh to be old. It was small, delicate, suggesting a woman's shoe. Curio, he thought, his mind flashing. To to Lady Beatrice, whose affair with Captain Drake had already complicated the case, or perhaps the quiet governess, Miss Clara Wren, who had slipped through his scrutiny like a wisp of smoke. As he knelt to examine the print, a faint click echoed from the shadows, a mechanism, like the decoy's pulley. Instinct took over. "Hastings, a terra!" Poirot shouted, diving behind a crate as a crossbow bolt whistled past, embedding itself in a wooden beam. The attic erupted in chaos. Hastings fired blindly into the dark, the gunshot deafening in the confined space. Poirot's heart raced, but his mind remained clear. The Crimson Shadow was here, and they were armed. "Show yourself," Poirot called, his voice steady despite the danger. "You cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. The game is over." A low laugh, soft and chilling, answered from the far corner. "You're persistent, Monsieur Poirot," a woman's voice purred, laced with a faint accent, French, perhaps, or an imitation. "But you're too late. The pack's secrets die with me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The voice was unfamiliar, yet its cadence held a hint of rehearsal, as if the speaker were playing a role. He crept forward, using the crates as cover, his lantern dim to avoid detection. The footprint, the voice, the crossbow all pointed to a calculated trap, but Poirot was no prey. He reached a pile of documents, half hidden under a tarp, and his fingers brushed a leather-bound ledger. Its cover bore a crimson seal, identical to the invitation that had brought him here. The pact, he thought, his pulse quickening. Before he could open it, a shadow lunged from the darkness, a glint of steel flashing. Poirot twisted, his cane blocking a dagger aimed at his chest. The impact sent a jolt through his arm, and he stumbled, the lantern clattering to the floor. The attacker, a slight figure cloaked in black, a red scarf masking their face, sprang back, their breath ragged. Poirot's shoulder throbbed, a shallow cut seeping blood, but his resolve was unbroken. "Hastings!" he shouted, and his friend charged forward, tackling the figure. The scarf fell, revealing Miss Clara Wren, the governess, her eyes wild with desperation. Her auburn hair was disheveled, her hands stained with crimson ink. In her grasp was a bundle of papers, clutched like a lifeline. "Mademoiselle Wren," Poirot said, rising, his voice calm but piercing, "you are the Crimson Shadow. The game is ended? Purloin, why these murders? Why the pact?" Clara struggled against Hastings' grip, her voice a snarl. "You don't understand. The pact was a curse, greed, betrayal, blood. They all deserved it. Harrow, the groundskeeper, even Evelyn, if she'd spoken. I was protecting the manor, my family's legacy." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Votre famille." "Explain, s'il vous plaît." Clara's defiance crumbled, her shoulders sagging. "My mother was a blackthorn, cast out for loving a commoner. The pact, those names in the pendant, they stole the manor's wealth, hid it in a trust none could touch. I found the ledger, the truth, they had to pay." Poirot nodded, piecing it together. The ledger, now in his hands, detailed a secret society formed by the manor's founders, a pact to hoard a fortune in gems, hidden beneath the chapel. Lord Harrow had been sniffing too close, the groundskeeper had been bribed to silence, and Evelyn, the heiress, was a threat to expose it all. Clara, driven by vengeance and a twisted sense of justice, had orchestrated the murders, her governess role a perfect disguise. But the crimson seal, Poirot said, the roses, the theatrics, why? Clara's lips curled, to frighten them, to make them feel the weight of their sins. "The seal was my mother's, the roses her favorite. I wanted them to know fear before they died." Hastings tightened his grip, but Poirot raised a hand. "Assez, Hastings, let her speak. She has confessed, but there is more." "The chapel, mademoiselle, what lies there?" Clara's eyes flickered with panic. "Nothing. I burned the last of the evidence. The fortune is mine now, hidden where no one will find it." Poirot smiled thinly. "Non, mademoiselle, you are clever, but not clever enough. The chapel was your feint, but the attic, this attic, is the truth. These documents," he held up the ledger, "they tell the story. And the constables, they are coming. As if on cue, footsteps thundered up the stairs. The constables, alerted by Hastings' gunshot, burst into the attic, their lanterns casting stark light. Clara lunged for the dagger, but Poirot was faster, his cane tripping her. She fell, sobbing, as the constables bound her wrists. The ledger, when opened, revealed the pack's final secret, a map to a vault beneath the manor, sealed with the crimson seal. Poirot handed it to the chief constable, his voice steady. The fortune is for Mademoiselle Evelyn to claim, as the rightful heir. The crimson shadow's reign is over. As Clara was led away, her cries echoing in the stairwell, Poirot felt a pang of pity. Greed and vengeance had twisted her, but the truth had prevailed. He turned to Hastings, his shoulder aching but his spirit unbowed. Mon ami, the case is closed. Let us leave this place of shadows. The manor awoke to a new dawn, the fog gone, the air clear. Evelyn, reunited with her father, vowed to restore the manor's honor, using the hidden fortune for good. Poirot, his work done, prepared to depart, but not before one final act. In his room, he found a letter, slipped under the door, written in Lord Harrow's hand. Monsieur Poirot, it read, if you read this, I am gone, but know my faith was in you. The rose was my warning heeded. Poirot smiled, tucking the letter away. The riddle was solved, the shadows banished, satisfying end. In the attic's ambush, Poirot unmasks Miss Clara Wren as the Crimson Shadow, her confession revealing a vendetta rooted in a disgraced family legacy. The ledger exposed the pack's hidden fortune, securing Evelyn's inheritance and ending the cycle of murder. With the killer in custody and the manor's secrets laid bare, Poirot's triumph was complete, his faith in justice restored as he left Blackthorn Manor behind, the final riddle solved with a poignant letter from the first victim.